is up, party people? So it's gonna be a fun one. Again, one of the things I definitely like about having these discussions is the opportunity to have these discussions with people that are cool, people that aren't assholes, people that, whether they agree or disagree, just want to have a damn conversation. And I had that opportunity with my boy Free Minded. You guys know him; he's been on a few times. Last night had a very good. I mean, it was in type chat and Discord, so I mean, it was what it was. But at the same time, it was respectful. He got his points across. I got my points across, which were correct. And it kind of just, conversation just ends. Then it picked up again in the 24/7 Flat Earth server. Oh, we all know about that place. And somehow now it's more than one place. But there's one thing that I noticed, and it's the idea that where Globers get triggered because they probably answer a lot of questions over and over again. I get triggered easily. It doesn't even take much breathing to make me triggered. But last night I had the opportunity to trigger a flat earther, this guy named Bong SU or SE or something, I don't know. But he gets triggered every time I explain to him how his perspective isn't even an observation. And then that conversation I said I had with Free Minded, it ended up being in the 24/7 server, and guess what happened then? I got banned, and then re-invited 10 minutes later. I don't know, but I told the guy I don't give a f. I don't need to be there. I can care less about being there. So I wanted to have this discussion where it's going to be more rational. And when I say more rational, I mean, hey, if you're a flat earther, you want to come on and talk about it, cool. I meant more rational in the sense of don't disrespect. It's not necessary. But yeah, that's my little rant for the moment. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of made more of a rant out of that because I hadn't got the meetup up yet, and I needed about 30 seconds. So I ranted, and there we go. Oh, nope, didn't even type it correctly. Give me 1 second so I can do this. Oh, and just the heads up to all, probably for the next week or so, guaranteed, I will be streaming around this time. I got like I said the other day when I disappeared off my own damn stream, I had actually, hang on 1 second. I had actually was taking a call for a project that I was trying to get on, and luckily for me, they took my bid and yay to me. So so for the next week or so, I'll be streaming a lot later compared to, but then again, shit happens. If you don't like it, boo-hoo. All right, hang on, let me do this real quick. This didn't work. Hang on, I'm sharing the link, people, to myself. Hang on. And I can't share it to the chat yet because I'm not in there yet. And the Jose way does not allow that. Oh, it's a V. That'd be why. Get it? All those letters for no reason. All right, there we go. Damn it, did it again. Foolish me. Oh, it worked. Cool. All right, so like I said, Hangout is up now, so I can stop ranting about absolutely nothing and rant about more, topical stuff like perspective and the idea in which a lot of flat earthers believe it works, which it doesn't. But hey, the idea of all this is for that. The idea of this discussion, I mean, is to weigh your thoughts and test them and see if they're worth a shit. Most aren't. Sorry. But yeah, I rant. Let me get into the chat real quick. What is up, GPS? Yes, you were sirs. You were sirs. What the hell is that? You were first. What's up, Mr. Mensa? Okay, go 1 2 3. What's up? How you doing? What up, Nick? Good to see you here, my friend. What up, Crash? And yes, if everyone wonders why I was late this time, it was because Crash told me to be late or else. So you guys can be mad at him if you expected me to be on time. I mean, realistically, I don't know why any of you would do that. But yeah, this time his fault. A few times it was like Farmer or Grizz. It was his fault a few times ago. What's up, Hannah? How you doing? Let's see. What up, they lie, Ohio? I'm not gonna. I'm gonna admit it. I hated first troll for a while just because he was a troll. Lately, he's been having good uploads. I gotta respect that at least, right? What up, Kurt? What's up, Sam Cam? What's up, Energy One? And for all those who are wondering what the hell happened to my logo, this is the TRUUTUBE logo. For those of you know, my boy Dreads, Question Everything, You've Been Exposed. He actually created a platform much like YouTube, but it's called TRUUTUBE. Everything's already started up, going. People, I got my channel on there. Description's in the link below, or the link is in the description below. Damn, and it's basically, you know, it's not exactly like YouTube. It's better, I think, it's better and it has more options. There's a little learning curve, but it's definitely worth it. Go, at least go to check it out. I'll throw the link in the chat. At the very least, go check it out. Like I said, it's fresh. Any content creators, you know, having an issue with this whole, you know, YouTube censoring and YouTube takedowns and the fucking BS copyrights, it's not going to happen there. So it can be much better. But back to what I was doing. Let's see. Don't want to miss anybody. All right, all right. What up, Jason? The only concaver on, and he says, "Happy Concave Week." Every week he says this. Every day he says it, actually. So surprising. What's up, Bansal? How you doing? Hey, Bansal. Are you flat or globe? I always like to ask him that. What's up, Zip? I said what's up to you, Hannah, right? I know I didn't miss you. Hey, Twitwit, how you doing? Let me see here. What's up, Militant Manny? How you doing, my friend? What's up, Matrix? How you doing? What's up, Woken SoCal? What's up, Toady? Did you see Spurs? Has now been positive. Oh, dude, he's been positively identified for years. I'm not sure if you remember when I did a little illustration of Globe Spurs or Wizard Spurs. That day he was fucking muting me on Jose's. Yeah, that's, everyone knows that's him. Let's see who else is here. What's up, Channel Q? How you doing? Let's see who else is here. What's up, B-Ball? How you doing, my friend? How's your son? Everything still good? Good. What's up, No Name? What's up, Prevent Pirate? Ah, you guys. How you guys doing? Get to see who the hell you are once your name changes over. Anyway, like I said, thank you guys for being here. I wanted to talk about this perspective. I'll go ahead and put the link in the chat because realistically, I want to get as many people in here as I can to have this conversation. Again, I'd like to have a conversation on perspective. If you're a flat earther and you're not here, you don't want your beliefs or your view on it challenged, then we got to remember that if we're going to talk perspective, then we need to talk the reality of perspective and what we both see. If we want to get into claims, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make sure it's never more than 2-on-1 against a flat earther or glober. I started to notice that it does happen here when you hear it on other panels or in like this Discord server. It's fucking annoying. So 100% I'm gonna be policing that from now on, because I do know it gets like that. Shit, I know I get like that, so I do apologize, and let's step it up. I mean, come on, we can do this. Hashtag we can do this, which is just right under hashtag it's just mass, which is, you know, still under hashtag truth army, because you know how I roll. But anyway, I digress. So like I said, I was having a conversation with Free-Minded about perspective. And I'm sure you guys saw the thumbnail. I will go ahead and, oops, sorry about that crash. I sometimes forget, hang on, I gotta figure out which one I wanna mute. When do I mute? Hang on, this is complicated. Ah, that's why. Bam. All right, there we go. So hang on, I got an echo and it's in my mic, so 1 second. Gotta get rid of it. And I know it has something to do with this goddamn voice meter. All right. See, the big issue is that I'm using the voice meter, and I know it works, but still hate it. It's what? What'd you say? Wait, I don't hear an echo anymore. Crash. Unmute yourself. Crash. Unmute yourself. Do it now. I think he was echoing into my ear, and it's all his fault. Crash seems to be the one at fault today. So everyone be mad at Crash. Any topic you want to debate against them, I will have your back 100%, even if it's flat earth stuff. He's getting beat up by his wife, that's why he can't talk. Anyway, all right, perfect. Which one is fucking muted and which one's not muted? I'm so confused. I have one of my, it says the TRUUTUBE one's muted, but it shouldn't be. Which means he doesn't hear me at all. Can you hear me, Crash? Nope. Microphone. There we go. Crash, can you hear me? Check, check. Ah, that's weird. Can you hear me? All right. I got a fucking echo again. I know why. Watch this.
You sound good here.
You know, it's on my side. These settings are all messed up. So I gotta change it. Try that. Nope. Nope, still hear myself. Oh, which is even worse. Which one is it? That one? Check. Can you hear me? I don't want to hear myself, damn it. Well, that's the problem, because I can... Yeah, no, I got echo on... A mecho? What the fuck is wrong with me? An echo on my side. So I'm trying to change it. Hang on. No. It's... I don't even know if you guys hear it in the chat. But I hear myself, like, as I'm talking. So it's very distracting. So I'm trying to fix it. Apparently, I don't want to hear myself. Give me 1 second. No. You just do you. It may get weird loud in here in a second. All right, so you guys can hear me right now? Or is it like, is it barely, or you guys can hear me? All right, because I'm insanely confused because I don't know why the hell this one is doing. I wonder if nope. I shouldn't be talking on the one you guys see talking. I should be talking on the other one. This one. But I can't because it echoes. But if you guys can hear me, that's all right. Okay, cool. Okay, so as long as you guys can hear me, then oh well. Wait, I know why. Bam! Watch this. Fuck. Watch how this is gonna work. There you go. Now I don't hear myself. I'm not even gonna tell anybody what the hell that was all about. Because yeah, that was embarrassing. Can someone talk real quick because no one can hear you and I want to make sure I get the settings right. Because I don't even hear anybody. This is a wonderful stream. I've done this 1,000 times and I still have not figured it out yet. So sad. Check. Someone talk.
I got you. I hear you. Uno, dos, tres. La tierra es plana.
Yeah, no, it's not
La tierra es plana y no se mueve. Y tampoco está ladeada.
Someone talk. I can see someone talking. So
we are talking.
Okay, I know which one it is.
We were.
I'm sorry. Fixing it now. Maybe. We'll see.
John broke us.
You know what would probably work? Making it so the voice meter knew you guys were talking. Go ahead and talk.
Hola. Hello.
Does everyone
Can you hear me? Eric is seriously flat. Checking in.
Whoa, you talked normal just now. You know that, right?
Right?
Did anyone else get that? I heard it. All right, cool. I appreciate that. Okay, so now that we got all the audio fixed, I apologize. I don't know how the hell that rookie mistake happened, seeing how I've done this so many damn times. But again, the idea of perspective is a very big topic with flat Earth. It's what I consider flat Earth. You're kind of loud, Earth. Can you mute yourself for whatever timing until then? Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Hey, Crash, let me ask you something, because you have a lot of ideas of how to phrase things and whatnot. If you had to use perspective, as an evidence, could you do it? So, for instance, let's do this better. If a bike is flying down the freeway, can't hear it, but you can see it in the distance, and it's tiny, but you know it's a bike, because obviously a bike looks different than a car. Are you going to be able to tell me what kind of bike that is, what size engine it is? And I'm talking it looks small. It's not in the next lane or 2 lanes.
If it's all way off in my horizon, no, I couldn't tell you what it is. Best I could do is tell you if it was a cruiser or a crotch rocket.
Yeah, but that'd be, well, certain situations you may not even be able to do that, right?
Yeah, it really depends on what's going on.
Let me see. I'm going to pull something up real quick and see if you can tell me if you can identify what this is with your perspective. Because again, I kind of want to lay this point down very, very adamantly. When anybody, flat or globe, refers to their perspective, you're not referring to anything relevant. If you're not explaining, you're not showing anything. You're literally saying, I see this, but you're not explaining. It doesn't. A perception, your perception does not explain anything at all. It doesn't even explain what you see or what you think you saw. It's just what you're doing, kind of taking it out of context, and it's weird because, again, like I said, it doesn't work that way.
Okay, well, can I explain something for you?
Absolutely.
All right, well, we believe in the law of perspective, which is we can only see within the vanishing point. For example, when you they ask, we can only see the stars for us to appreciate. Let's say if you have stars on your ceiling, and on the bottom on the floor, you could appreciate all the stars on the ceiling, but as soon as you get closer to the ceiling, you can only see maybe 1 or 2, or maybe none. You got too close to the ceiling to see the stars. So that's what's happening right now. For example, the stars, we can see them because they're within the vanishing point. And as soon as you ask astronauts, hey, did you see stars up there? None of them remember seeing any stars.
Okay, but the idea, and this is kind of one of the things that exactly what I'm talking about. when you're using an example of perspective, or your perspective, and then you want to use, like, say the hallway is actually a good one, or I'm going to go ahead and share the one that Free Minded used in his explanation. The thumbnail for this, basically. Yes, your perspective is that the lights in the road meet, but that doesn't explain what you're seeing. The same way you said the hallway,
Yeah.
you see the hallway convert, but you don't. It doesn't explain what you're seeing. When I say that, I even messed up myself. When I said you see it converting, that's not even perception. Perception is you seeing it. It's a view. Just everyone that's looking, they're perceiving what they're looking at, or that's their. Oh, damn, that is their perspective. Now, once you perceive what your perspective has shown you, that has nothing to do with evidence, truth, fact. All that is your opinion. So the idea that these things are descriptions of, it doesn't work. It doesn't. Not only does it not work, it's used for situations that no. I don't even know how to explain how it doesn't. It's not the same thing. For instance, like I said, me and Free Minded were talking about the sunrise sunset and what his perspective is. He shared with me a video from, I'm not sure if you guys even know who this is, Phuket Word. I've never even heard of the guy. But
I have.
I'm assuming, I know he's a flat earther, obviously. Is he a dick? Like, if I played a video of his, is he gonna flag me?
Depends on what kind of mood he's in.
Well, what about, how does this work? Anyone in the chat, please help me out. If I share an upload, and that upload is said, Phuket Word, it's his upload, but Free Minded downloaded it and then uploaded it under his channel. He says that, in his description who the originator is, but then can I still get a copyright?
Yes, because the algorithm looks at the upload, not who did it.
All right, well,
Phuket Word uploaded originally.
I was gonna show it, but I'm not gonna lie. Flat earthers that I don't know, I don't trust for shit. I'll play anybody's. I'll play fucking any flat earther that I know's uploads, because none of the flat earthers that I actually know and are cool with, I'm pretty damn sure they would never flag me for no bullshit like that. But yeah, I'm not gonna play it, but I can easily describe it because it's on my Discord. Go ahead and pull that up. So basically, in the video that I'm talking about, that guy Phuket Word, and that's the thing. Free Minded, if you listen to this, and I'll say this to you next time I see you, those are your claims. So what happened is I said, I started, explaining how certain observations in this upload were just not accurate and possible. And I think once he realized that, he said his first reaction was, did I say those are my words? Did I say that I agree with what he's saying? And the answer is yes, 100%. Because you are presenting someone else's observation. Nothing wrong with that. You are presenting and using someone else's explanation for it. Perfectly fine. Here's the problem. If what they're saying is false, why aren't you calling it out yourself? That's the weird part to me. Because if Free Minded wasn't comfortable using his, Phuket words, why would he use them? And again, I know Free Minded can be pissed. I shared this conversation. Let's see. What do you guys want here? Crash, why would you ask me where the link is?
I will be right. Well, I did that earlier. I'll be right back. I got a weird delay. So let me reset everything.
Oh no. All right, so anyone trying to join, you got to give me a second because my phone just died. And I can't let anyone in the hangout right now. Ahaha. Okay, so like I was saying, kind of, damn, completely sidetracked myself. So the upload. So the idea that a flat Earth is an observation, it's not. One of the arguments that I got at the 24th, or actually I was saying to Free Minded, again, everything being Free Minded talked about was cool. It wasn't no disrespect at all. I like him. He's a cool dude. But here's the thing. Oh wow, really? Hey, dude. I've heard you debate, dude. I wouldn't even do that to you. I wouldn't even accept a debate with you because I feel bad. Anyway,
Can you hear me now, Sean?
I can hear you now.
Awesome. I was getting a weird delay, so I just reset everything.
Yeah, I think that's like the meat's like downside or something. And again, anyone who is trying to join right now, you guys are gonna have to give me 3 minutes until my phone gets turned back on, so I can actually, accept you into the room. But like I was saying, if you're gonna use someone's or observation or uploads, whatever, blah blah blah, you should stand by it, or at the very least, be able to and willing to point out the things that are wrong in that upload, because there's a lot of things wrong. I will go ahead and pull it up, and I'll mute it. And what I'll do is I'll probably just scroll through it with the mouse rather than play it. Again, I'm sorry, I don't know this guy from anyone. I don't trust him. So apparently, Flat Earth is on a copyright streak. Copyright happy streak is what you call it. And I gotta figure out what the hell happened to my chat. I don't know why the hell it stopped scrolling like that.
Yeah, the whole thing with FE core is getting way out of control.
And you want to know what the best part is? FE core don't give a F. They're getting more publicity doing that than anything else.
Oh, I know, but it's not going to end well for them. They'll get a great boost for a little bit, but once everything goes through court, they're going to get fucked.
No, see, here's the thing, and this is really super weird. So, for one, anyone that sues FE Core, they're not going to win. And there's a reason for this. The reason would be that they're a group that literally creates their own content, and any sharing of it's not even, they don't even share it. You know how they make everyone pay for it? There's a reason for that. You have to pay for their content. That's why in their YouTube uploads, it's only excerpts of what you need to go to the membership and pay for. So if you use even those, that's still part of their content.
Here's where they screwed themselves, is on their own website they claim to be a 501c3 organization, and in the state of Indiana they had to have all kinds of stuff they don't have.
Are they in Indiana?
Yes, they are.
Okay, well then that's what it is. I mean, is that, see, I'm not gonna lie to you, I have no idea. As far as I know, Sly used an upload and they didn't like it. That's as far as my knowledge of this whole situation goes.
And it wasn't even, it got spread to Red's channel because they flagged Red for mirroring one of Sean Hufford's videos that was supposedly taken at the headquarters of FE Core that they have listed on their paperwork.
That's fucked up, but I'm not gonna lie. Oh well, I don't really care about Reds too much. The problem with Reds is he's burned enough bridges, or burned all of the bridges he can with me, so I don't really care. But I'm an asshole too.
I'm not saying I agree with everything that happens on Red's channel, but what FE Core did was wrong. What they did was FE Core downloaded Sean Hufford's video from Sean's channel and re-uploaded it as a private video on their channel, and then use that to file copyright strikes against that video.
Is there proof for that?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. Then they are doing the copyright issue that YouTube has. That was the exact situation I had. What happens is a troll edits your shit, takes out all your logos, and then copyrights you. And guess who doesn't give a fuck about reality, how that shit works? YouTube. When it happened to me, and this is the difference between, and I'm going to tell you guys exactly how to resolve these issues. Okay, first off, what happens is YouTube, when you talk to YouTube, the headquarters and all that crap, it's a receptionist, and they don't have any departments set forth for any of this. And they're going to tell you, did you try using the flag button? Did you try, appealing it? Those two things are the worst thing you can do. These are what you do. You don't flag the channel. You file a claim on them. Here's why. And know this. Once the other party tries to appeal it, or then say the other person is lying, everyone's information is going to get put out there. I'm telling you that right now, just so everyone understands that. So do this on your own accord. But what I meant, what's going on is the fact that what they do is they they change that. But YouTube is not interested in creators, content creators, and or viewers for that matter. I mean, viewers mostly now. So what happens is it's not their problem. And they say this in their little guidelines. It's not they don't give a fuck. That's up to your guys' attorneys and what they decide in the court. Now, here's the other fun part. I don't care what side you're on. If you're both making a complaint, yeah, both are going to be out some money if you're willing to take it to court. And here's the other thing. I don't think there's one bit of footage out of anybody here on YouTube that I've seen or in this little community worth a fucking court hearing. I mean, the only one I can think of that's the other thing. Even Team Skeptic had a reasonable reason for being pissed in issuing in filing an appeal against that dude's copyright. But here's the thing. Again, they don't care. Team Skeptic was willing to go to a lawyer. Here is the main part. Ready? You have to go to the YouTube Content Creator Forum. Why? Because it's not only like the the big sub channels. It's not even, none of them are actually any entertainment. So based big time YouTubers. They're YouTubers with 100,000 plus that just do random. And some of them actually apply to be, troubleshooters for people like myself. They then contact YouTube. They will become your representative, believe it or not. It may take one or two explanations and evidence for your claim, but they will get it done. For instance, the second I realized how this whole copyright scam thing goes, this is what you do. Go get the video that you made that they jacked it from. Here's the important part. The date. The upload date is the only thing that will save you. Because their upload date is going to be the day they copyrighted, and your upload date is going to be previous. It's going to be before that. That will save you. Second they do that, whatever hold they have on your account, blah, 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 they will actually release it within 2 to 3 days. So I just gave everyone the lowdown on how it works. You're welcome.
Yay.
And it's in YouTube, that the worst part is YouTube actually knows it is a serious issue. Like, seriously, guys, think about this. If you have a million views on one upload, you're making a lot of monetization on that. And if someone then puts a claim against you, and it's your content, realistically, unless you know that avenue to go talk to those people in the forum, you're fucked. Again, no one's spending thousands to get their video back online. And I don't think it's ever worked to get someone kicked off of YouTube. It just, you can't live stream, can't upload sometimes. But like I said, I gave you the exact steps you need to take, and if you do, you'll be just fine. You'll actually get all your shit back, and they'll actually see. And that's the other thing. I don't think YouTube will penalize them. I don't think they give a fuck. So good luck on that one. All right, okay, so my phone's back on. Sorry about that, guys. Now that I got that good ass little information rant out, I can go back to what I was doing and invite or allow people to get in here. All right, so you guys are gonna see me pop in here real quick. So all this off.
We're going to have 2 or 3 Sean G's in here again.
I hope not, because I think I just screwed myself. Hang on. Or actually, I didn't, because I've already shared the link. Hang on one sec. Okay, I just found a flaw in this method. But we won't say anything. Or I won't. I wonder how many people are trying to get in. I doubt any. All right, so there we go. So I will be jumping in right now. And I know I just went on a huge tangent, but when you brought up that FE core stuff, it really irritates the fucking shit out of me. It's like flat Earth, and I would love any flat earther to answer this question. Don't you find it a big situation that, for one, any result they ever come up with, you have to pay to see it? What do you think, Earth?
I think yes. I think it's. I mean, we're at war with the blue marble mentality. And the money, I mean, I love it that this nonprofit, my CPR already, yeah, they already double checked that, and my money, the money that I sent,
okay, never mind.
Is going there is going to be tax deductible, and I'm happy for them.
Oh no, wait, who are you saying is not?
They are not registered with the IRS.
Hang on, are you saying they are, or you're not? Because I can tell you right now, Karen's already said way too much. 100%. Because I've heard Karen bragging about
I trust the guy that does my taxes, and I told him this is my baby now. Let's help these guys.
Wait a minute. So you're like, if you donate to like a organization or a fake one, you realize that they can say whatever the hell they want that money's going to. Because if that was the case, everyone would understand that. For instance, Red Cross, when you donate, pennies on the dollar actually make it to those people.
Right. No, I know, but everything, I want them to use the money for whatever they want, for gas, for breakfast, to have a party while they're doing Globotions,
but see, you can't,
hotels.
We're not using Globotion. It's
I'm sorry, Globe Exorcism.
Oh, I thought it was okay. I thought, yeah, that one works too.
So, like for example, we're gonna have a party.
Do you donate to them, or do you pay a membership?
No, I just give them money.
Okay, so that's different. That'd be so when they come out with a result, you can't be like, or actually, that's even more of a reason. You're not a member. You donate to their quote unquote cause, yet you're not allowed to see anything they have.
Well, because I know already the result is a flat and stationary.
But wait, they're the ones that are quote unquote providing this evidence, but yet you haven't seen any, and that's why you give them money.
I give them money because it's activism. It's a hands-on activism. Anybody that is trying to replicate scientific experiments,
I think I don't care if their qualifications, whatever they need the money. Sure, let's say Sean, let's say you need to come and do an observation here, Sunset Beach, California,
Mhm.
and I'll send you the money to come and come on get a plane or get a train and
Well,
come
I'm in
and be
San
part of the
Diego.
observation.
I'm not that far from you. I'll
Hey brother,
just
you
drive
should
right
come
up.
down this September 14. We're gonna have some amazing people, and they're gonna have some TV station from Switzerland interviewing you guys.
You know
So
what?
if you want to meet,
And oh yeah, you're connected with me in Discord. Send me information on that. I may actually go.
that sounds amazing, man. It will be an honor to have you over here, and you could actually transmit live from here, give you access to the Wi-Fi, and you could do a show from here if you want, and interview some of these flat earthers, and you could give them a flatotomy if you want them.
I don't even know what that is.
You have fun with that, Sean. The 14th, I'm going to be playing in the woods with a bunch of other idiots with toy trucks.
Oh, I'm so jealous. Yeah, why don't you offer me one of those RC
It's gonna be
crawlers?
a beach party. It's gonna be a beach party, and flat earthers are an amazing party to party with, brother.
What's up, Militant Manning?
Because my crawlers are worth like 100 of your hats.
So,
Hey, what's up, man? What's going on, Sean?
just chilling, trying to
You know
get
who the
this
guy? Like one
idea of
guy.
perspective.
There's a guy named
Bob,
Bottasimo or something like that.
speak up. You went low. I didn't hear you.
Yeah. I'm on. Oh, my bad.
Yeah.
I'm kind of driving, but I'm in a red light right now. But do you know a guy named? I think it's Bottasimo. He's in the chat.
Uh,
The chat room. Bottasimo. I don't know who that is.
I think I'm
Is
looking
he a
for it
bot
right
or what? He's telling people like, "Oh,
now.
you're just advanced to level 1, level 2." So I don't know what the hell he's talking about. Do you know?
I'm almost 100% positive you're. Yeah, dude, it's a bot. You're
Okay.
you didn't
He's
start
tripping.
fighting with it. It's actually
The
one
bot
of
is
my
tripping.
bots that I just started.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's actually pretty cool. Like, so basically, they put a link in. I guess that link like shows basically, how long people are here, who shows up and who doesn't. It's what it is. So what many people don't know happens in that chat is there are many wrenched trolls among you. So what ends up happening is they unmute or they unblock people as we block them. So, but there's a key giveaway to this, because every time I look at my community chats or basically who are my mods, who have I blocked, while I'm looking at the mods, I literally watch their name flash from whatever the crap you're using and to who it really is. And that's why a lot of them keep getting unmodded. But that guy, that Battissimo, he will be capable of actually making it so you cannot, or you can do that, but I'll see it instantly. It's going to alert me the second I see one of those names. But
Okay.
that's here and there. Yeah, but yeah, that's a
Got it.
bot.
Got it. Right on.
Hmm?
Thanks for clarifying that. I thought it was something related to.
Yeah, but I mean, if it gets annoying, let me know, because I've never used this bot, and I'm looking at it now, and it's a chatty motherfucker, and I
Yes,
didn't
it is.
realize it was. I didn't realize it was that chatty.
I tried that bot for a while on my channel and didn't like it.
It will nonstop, won't it? I don't
Yep.
like that at all.
I liked what it gave me access to as far as information, but it is a chatty bot.
Okay, so I need to either shut it up or something. But yeah, okay, I get it. Awesome.
It's got a lot of settings. I just started playing with them, and we went back to our MeSeek spot.
Okay, so it's something. Once I figure out, it could be worth it. Then you're saying it's just you got to figure that shit out before you put them in a chat like I did.
Yeah, I'm admittedly not a tech guy. This is why I have a tech guy.
Oh, I have tech guys too, and I'm learning, but I let them do it anyway.
But yeah, the Battissimo is a very chatty. It's supposed to help with interaction and shit on the channel. I got tired of it because it was like spamming my live chat.
Yeah, I'm seeing it do that right now. I'm going on its little page, and I'm trying to figure out if I want to shut it down real quick. If I can shut it down. It's like, I'm going to shut you down. What are you talking about?
But yeah, I said, well, everybody's been on my channel. We use my bot for all kinds of games and shit.
I think I'll just log out. Maybe that'll work. Oh,
How's it going,
Thanks, man.
AISF? I mean, EISF. My bad. I said A. How's it going, Earth is seriously flat? Is he still there? He's muted. He's busy. He's busy converting people to flat Earth, I guess.
Oh yeah, as a full-time glovortionist. I mean, I'm sorry, as a full-time glove exorcist.
I think he said he. Yeah, I think man, he said he was driving, so I think he wasn't ignoring you. I don't think. Or I think wait, you said someone was driving. Manny's driving.
Yeah, I'm driving.
So the topic tonight is perspective, right?
100%.
Awesome. I have a demonstration I'm working on. Give me about 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's a perfect segue on that one. So I can now that I remember what I want to show you guys. Okay, so like I said, I was having this conversation with Free Minded last night, and then it progressed into the 24/7 server, which was hell on earth. But there's a huge difference in this, in that Flat Earth uses perspective as an evidence and or a fact or an explanation, and it's not. It's not an explanation. Go ahead and show you guys it's not an explanation because I want to be able to come with facts. And again, you guys can say, I not you guys on the panel, I'm just saying in general. Anyone can say that I'm just reading off of what it says, but actually I'm just making sure that my understanding of it matches what the experts have given us when they defined it originally, right? So can't redefine stuff. So again, perspective, a mental view or prospect. Mental view, prospect. Those aren't evidence. Those are literally just descriptions. A visible scene. Yep, 100% true. And interrelations in which a subject or its parts are mentally viewed. For instance, in that in this image, a road, lights, night sky. There you go. That's what that description describes. Number 2. And then it says, for B, it says the capacity to view things in their true relations or relative importance. So again, it's not saying what you see and think is real. It's saying it's you validating that you're looking at realistic things. A light, the road, in the night sky, etc., etc. Third definition for it would be the appearance to the eye of objects in respect to their relative distance and positions. Again, it's not explain. It doesn't explain what you're trying to observe and explain to us. It's letting you know. It's what your eyes see in respect to the relative distance and position, which means regardless of, you're able to see it. But that's why we need tools. That's why we need all these aspects to figure out distances, to figure out how objects react and appear in certain situations. Anyone disagree with that? Have any of the 3+ definitions I gave?
Nope.
Flat Earthers? It's. I don't know what you would deny out of that. That's pretty cut and dry, simple. You can perceive those definitions.
I have a question about perspective, Sean.
Absolutely.
Because, for example, we perceive that the sun and the moon are only 0.54 and 0.52 degrees, which is 31 minutes arc minutes, 31 arc minutes, and 32 arc minutes. So they appear to be the same size from our perspective. So where did you come out that with our perspective, with those numbers and those degrees and those arc minutes, tell us that they're both the same size, almost the same size?
Keyword, almost. Even bigger, better keyword. When are you observing these? How are you observing them? How are you measuring them?
Those are measurements that all astronomers are giving us about the sun. What they see is that their length, their wavelength, whatever they call that, is measuring degrees.
Oh, wait, okay, so
And
what you're
on
saying,
minutes.
are you talking about the quote unquote altitude or the azimuth, or are you talking about as they travel through our skies or appear to travel through the sky?
I'm talking exactly of what astronomers appear to them with all the instruments.
Okay, no,
They're within less than a degree of a half a degree in size.
Okay, yeah,
They're measuring things.
Okay, I get what you're saying now. It's okay, but here's the thing. Yeah, if you at a glance, yeah, they look the same size. Here's the problem.
They're measuring the same size.
Yeah,
too.
no, but they don't measure the same size. You even said
They are measuring almost the same size.
So if I Google that, they're going to tell me I'm going to get the same numbers.
You're gonna get it almost the same. Within, like, let's say I'm telling you 31 arc minutes, and the moon is 32 arc minutes. And the moon is also 0.54 degrees, and the sun is 0.52 degrees. So there are measurements right there that tell us that they're almost the same. It's like having a twin brother, and your twin brother is almost half an inch, a quarter of 1/8 of an inch taller than you. And you're telling me, no, he is 30 feet high and I'm only 5 feet high.
Okay, what about
And
this?
they appear to be only 1/8 of an inch size difference. But your science is telling me that.
Arc minutes and degrees is only relative to your position and how far away the object is from you.
And what's up, Tom? How you doing, sir? And what's up, Chris Berry? Let's keep it civil, Tom. We don't need to be bickering at each other and all that crap, please. I'm happy actually Chris is here, because Chris figures he has a very good understanding of it, so it's going to be interesting to hear his perspective on it. Okay, so if I said to you, actually I'd probably rather show you a picture, or those pictures of like a guy, he looks really tiny in a picture, and god damn it, he looks tiny in a picture, and that it wasn't to any of you guys, it was to this guy right here. What's up, Aaron? How you doing, sir?
What's up, John?
So we are we flat Earth Aaron, or are we construction Aaron right now?
What topic are you talking about?
Damn it! Okay.
Oh, look, it's the Aaron that's running from me in a one-on-one.
No, Crash. He's my best friend.
With the low perspective. With the low perspective, right now we're debunking that the sun is 93 million light years away
Thank
from
you for reminding me what I was trying to say. So I'm gonna go ahead and share this, or actually, I wanted to give this example. Like you can see a picture of like the guy looks really tiny, and like there's a ball, and it looks like 10,000 times bigger than him, and he's holding it. And like usually they're titled like perspective.
Yep.
Are you asking me, Sean?
I'm asking any flat earther who wants to talk.
Okay, I have an answer. I mean, Sean, in your field,
Yes.
I'm guessing.
Please give me 1 minute.
Hello. I was talking to the hosts.
Yeah.
Right?
Hang on, Tom. You're next. Earth. If you're
Sean,
not on mic, you're hot. Thank you.
Sean, you've used Swede rods, right?
Absolutely.
You know what Swede?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a line. Okay. It's a line of sight.
How does Swede rods work? Just so that the audience knows. Right?
Can you explain that? You would set it. Well, the best way to do it is you would set 2 points, and basically with the naked eye, you will line those points up and have a second party then place other points in between, in quote unquote in line with the 2 points.
So how are what are Swede rods though? So that the folks listening know what are they, or how do we
The one,
build them?
as I know
just so
them,
they know?
it's a round rod, but it has a slit in it basically, and it basically gives you an opportunity to magnify a longer distance and have that line more accurate.
Yeah, a straight perspective line, right?
Yeah, but see, here's the thing. The reason it's described that way, of perspective, is the fact that, actually, I don't even think it's described that way, but I could see why you would say that. Because it's not an accurate straight line. Meaning, if we were to, and you would, and let me know if I'm wrong in this, if we set a laser, or better yet, a total station onto that and check those points, would you be confident in saying that that line is completely straight, or it may deviate off a little bit because we're using very much more accurate tools?
Swede rods are good for about a tenth, right?
Okay,
They're good within a tenth.
Okay, so but see,
we know that.
That's exactly what. Yeah, of course. But that's what I'm kind of illustrating in the fact that, our perception, it works it works until we
that
see
line though. Even if what I'm saying, Sean,
but a
is like
perception doesn't. But perception doesn't have the explanation you need.
for long distance, you're right. For short
any distance,
it does. Yeah.
How? Because even then,
I can grade a parking lot with Swede rods, right?
Yeah.
You know.
But, okay. Yeah. But is a general contractor?
I couldn't do a runway.
Does a general contractor want tits, or does he want plus or minus is okay?
But I'm saying I couldn't do a runway. I could do a Walmart parking lot with Swede rods, but I couldn't do a runway, right?
Well, there's a huge. Okay. I see what you're saying in scale. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah. I agree. Yeah, I can use a peep sight, but I can't use a peep sight at 100 feet and think it's going to be completely accurate. I get it.
So let's talk about now what do they use to grade runways?
But you're literally just proving my point.
Well, kinda. I'm backing your point. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and if we're grading out a parking lot nowadays, we're going to use GPS.
Yes.
Which also backs the Globe.
I've got no argument.
That's here nor there. That's here nor there. Okay, but it's again, these are all tools that help our perception become an observation explained.
I have a question
an explanation
about
the tool.
Let's say MachineWorks, GPS, Trimble. There's so many of them. Do those MachineWorks? Let's say when you're running a machine, you're grading a runway. Doesn't that require first a man on the ground to go set points?
No. Yes and no. When you're setting up a GPS, you're going to have a control. Your control is whatever you want it to be. So, for instance, if I'm going to cut a runway,
if you don't have the program in your machine will not do.
But GPS is programmed into your phone. I mean, we can use our GPS location. Yeah.
The man on the ground set those points first.
Oh no! No. Matter of fact, now what's happening is surveyors are now having to become GPS companies because it takes out the surveyor. The plans that the surveyor uses to set the points on site they're basically GPS downloads it and instantly it's on file. That's the main reason why it's so wonderful.
They take a topography of the land and then do basically a takeoff of what should happen to the land.
But look, right? Google Earth is a GPS already has that data. Everyone has that data.
Let's say I have a mountain. I need to excavate a mountain or level it off. So without the surveyor, we're saying now it's satellite only. Uh, there's a topography of the land, and then that's downloaded to the contractor,
Yes.
and the contractor uploads what they want to do to the top of that mountain, which is cut off the top half of it,
Let's say 40 feet.
and without any surveyor on the ground, I can run a machine up there and just start cutting off the top of that mountain.
You have to know how to set up your GPS, but yes, 100%. Matter of fact,
I don't know, actually. Sean, I can't argue with it. I don't know.
On actually look into it. It's actually pretty fucking revolutionary when it comes down to this. What happens is you set up, and you then have a site without lath. Property lines, we'll say, are there, maybe concrete guys, but grading, blueprints, topos, don't need them. It's in the computer.
Sat only.
Yeah, it's badass. It's insane.
Right.
Cat actually has a fucking badass system now that basically is trying to take the because you have to have an idea of how the GPS systems work. Cat's now have developed a system that you basically don't even need to. Your boss or your general.
They build it into their machine. I've seen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cat Gen 2s, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They build it into their machine,
Crazy.
which I don't understand. Where you can just put the bucket on the ground, press a button, and it gets an elevation for you. You know,
Why
with
not?
no
The
laser, no
same
man
way-
on the ground. Oh yeah.
Well, the same way we used to do old school, where the gray checker puts puts his laser out, and then he puts the receiver on his linker rod. I'm sorry, and then a receiver on the dozer. That's what I've always used. It's the same thing. It's just it's simplified. It's taken out the human error.
Let's just say it's not human error. Let's just say that there is a signal coming to the machine from somewhere, right? To give its elevation, its gyroscopic position. Tracks are leaning this way, tracks leaning that way. Bucket is over here. There's man, these new machines are total censored up.
Oh yeah, big time.
But is that from space?
Yes. Where else could it be from?
I don't know.
Well, they do have a tower system that they set up in the center of their site, and that feeds out to every one of the machines.
That has its quote unquote stream key. We'll just say
Exactly.
Stream key. Yeah. Better.
Yep. Yeah, and it's pretty fantastic. I got to see it firsthand, and I was amazed. I was blown away.
Yeah,
basically, the guy in the bucket just sat there.
Yeah,
that's basically all he did.
Well, then, Sean, you understand that how it would be using, for instance, grading with just hubs, to grading with a laser and receiver, to GPS. I got to see it all. I got to do all of them, and I'm gonna tell you right now, I hate GPS. Why? Because then my production time instantly has to go up. It's not about what the task at hand. I've taken out all the variables that make it difficult. Therefore, my production would have to speed up, which means I get to be more tired, and my machine has to work harder. Plus, I love setting up when I do a pad, like a housing pad or something. I enjoy pounding that finished hubs in. I don't care. It's the funnest thing in the world to me. I will always avoid GPS completely. But yeah, we are so to freak off track. It's insane. Actually, we weren't off track. We just got off track in this subject. Sorry about that, Chris. I know you don't know construction, so it's kind of.
You guys think just had the Farm Progress show here. New tech that's coming out in the next 10 years is awesome.
Yeah, hey Chris, you can't complain because you've had these talks about jiu-jitsu on my panels, and I told everyone to fuck off too. So you get to see.
Yeah, but jiu-jitsu is interesting.
Well, what Aaron's talking about is interesting to me as well. It's my career. It's my everything.
Sean G. So I have one more follow-up question, and then let's get back to your show topic.
You better not copyright me, Chris.
Let's give a little background music to your talk.
I have one more follow-up question, Chanji, and then get back to your show. Are you telling me that when I put that fucking bucket down and I pull towards me, it's going to be within a quarter of an inch grade due to the GPS signals that are telling my bucket what to do?
Yep, and here's why. Because
Oh,
remember that. Hang on.
we're gonna have
Remember
fights.
that the tower that Sean was just speaking of that they set in on site. Well, the reason that tower's there is to mitigate any lag, any hiccups. All the information that we discussed goes to that tower, and it grabs it all. So when anything that the operator, anything the operator is getting is already in this. It's already in a system that is within a line of sight of it, basically. And I'm very sure.
Isn't the program, the topographical program, isn't it already inputted into the machine itself, the excavator, the dozer, the grader? Isn't it already inputted into itself, so it already knows its position? I will give you GPS position.
No. It needs the tower to find position. No. Only thing it has entered into that program, or any software or anything, any data that the GPS knows offhand right away before he even turns it on in the machine, is the elevations at which the site, final grade will be, and its parameters. Other than that, it's just like turning your phone on and going, how do I get to here? But it tells you a very detailed what here is.
Yeah, and they'll take it down. It's accurate up to 1/8 of an inch, and the way that what you were describing was the elevation actually tells the engine how hard to work. That's how close they have it. It's crazy.
I would never trust those machines. Fuck that.
That's how the top.
I'm a fucking real operator. God, fuck that machine.
I know. Me and Sean, actually, we'd rather pull levers, actually, because it's awesome.
Run his job.
But the guy that was just telling me about it's within 1/8 of an inch, is that TopCon spec right there?
Who?
TopCon.
TopCon doesn't do GPS yet.
It's so awesome to hear you guys in construction talk about an eighth of an inch.
Is that a Trimble spec?
I don't. First of all, I can tell Aaron has done concrete or carpentry before because he uses inches still. I only go tenths.
No. I always use tenths.
And it's within a half tenth. Is that
I'm a tenth.
But the guy fine as I've ever heard a contract or general want.
The guy before me said 1/8 of an inch, right?
Yeah, but
that's because I did carpentry. I did all sorts of stuff. Now we work underground and I work with pipes, pipe work.
Wait.
Water company.
You guys do only water? You guys do sewer, electric, everything?
Water, sewer, electric, gas.
Sorry, Sean, you're still at the bottom of my totem pole. You know what I'm saying?
I know.
I did underground I was a loader operator for underground, and then here and there I trench. But my machine that I in my opinion perfected, it's a loader, front end loader, or a dozer, one of the two.
Yeah, mine is an inch like it's a big deal. I play around with 30 thousandths or less all day long.
Well, you and your bearings can look a ball.
Machining is different.
And I'll let you know right now, any loader will run over and crush any bike you think you have. What?
Oh, I know it will. My granddad would work at the cat shack that builds them damn machines you're running.
Yeah, Sean G. You didn't call it a tractor.
Sean G. Convert
last question and then
1 inch.
Okay.
What? Convert 1 inch into tenths right now. I know you can.
It's 3/4. Just maybe a little under 3/4 of a tenth.
0.82. Right?
Yep.
There we go.
Oh man, look, I'm gonna tell you right now, I barely can tell inches. I literally tell everything in tenths.
Me too.
I can't do anything about it.
No.
Okay, so hang on. So Aaron.
Let me ask you a good question.
No, hang on. No, stop. Because you haven't aggravated me. I actually liked your questions, but I know there's at least 2 people in this chat that want to talk that haven't got a chance. Chris and Multi, and they're both flat earthers. So
Let them ride.
did you guys want to? I know, Chris. I know you like to say no. This is why, but what do you? What are your interpretations of what perception is? Not flat Earth evidence, but what is perception or perspective? I'm sorry, which is yeah, same thing.
Perspective. Which I just smashed Sean G at with the Swedes.
Actually,
What is perspective?
You just fact checked me if I knew what I was talking about.
I'm
Yeah,
just joking.
yeah, I know. Yeah, so the idea that perspective gives you evidence. When someone says perspective, what is perspective?
Well, like, if I said, "What's your perspective?" That means what's your take on something. If I said, "There's perspective in that drawing," then that's coming down to the layout and design of the drawing on a piece of paper to mimic what we call perspective and reality of things converging in the distance.
Okay. So you are correct, but at the same time, wrong. I'm not even gonna say wrong. Too in depth of a thought. It doesn't explain anything. Perspective doesn't explain anything. It's just the idea of seeing something. An observation is is the think tank of your perspective or of perspective. But again, it doesn't explain anything. It doesn't. It's just saying I see.
Exactly. Here, I got that short little demonstration ready.
It's an observation. It's an observational point of view.
I'll bring up the definitions of those, but I'm telling you right now, it's not. I already did the. Actually, I have it right here.
Well, but what's the point?
Okay, so. Well, the point is, so last night I was talking to you know who Freemind is. I was talking to him. We were having a discussion on the sunrise sunset, and his explanation for why. His explanation basically was, it's our perspective that makes us think it's touching the horizon, but it's not. Because you don't see a sun. Or let me show you. So he used this. This is his. I'm pretty sure you saw my thumbnail, but this is his what he started with. This is. He says that the reason sun sets the way we see it is the same thing as these lights in the road converging. Now, do you agree with that, or you have to think about it? Because I can understand how I'm putting you on the spot to tell me right or wrong. Or is this how you see it, perceive it?
On a flat Earth, yes.
But we don't live on a flat Earth, Chris.
I'm saying, yeah.
On the flat Earth model, how big is your guys' sun? I'm doing some quick math, so.
Well, here's the thing. That's hang on, too far. Hang on, stop. It's beyond what I'm going to do right now. So, in this image that we're looking at, yes, the road and the lights do appear to converge. Would you also say that those light posts and the lights get a lot smaller too? Now, we can measure how much smaller, because we can measure the poles. Each pole, and they're going to get smaller and smaller until the last one that we can see. Right?
Well, yeah, that's one aspect of perspective.
Well, no, that's one aspect of convergence, not perspective. Perspective.
Something I
You're cutting out.
I hate to interrupt, but Sean G, is that far left, the lowest one, that light way far down there, is it above the one that's over to the right, the one that's right in our face? Is it above
Aaron,
or below it?
That's disingenuous to ask, because we would need to know the elevation of that road, and we both know roads are not flat.
All right. I'll give you.
Well, but I mean, in general, if you had a flat road with lights like that and the camera angle where it is, yes, the one at the end would appear to be lower than the one closest. That's a fact.
Okay,
That's not in.
but we would also see a long pole. We would see a long pole, but it would just look shorter. We wouldn't, but we don't see any poles. There's a reason for that. It is exactly how, what we see in our perspective, but our perspective, we see that, doesn't explain why we see that. We would then have to go into why we see that, and then then it becomes an explanation or an observation with an explanation behind it.
Well,
that's the main
but
difference.
An explanation.
Huh? Okay, what's the explanation? Okay, what is it?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying I know it specifically, but there is an explanation behind perspective and why with an object as the distance increases, the angular size decreases.
Okay, so that's your guess on, not guess. That's the best way you think you can explain it on the spot, because I am putting it on the spot. So
sure.
We'll put it this way: if any way you explain what we're looking at, I'm not going to hold it to you, because I want a good explanation for what we see here, and then we can then take that same observation, that same perspective, and see if it matches observations. Because again, observations.
Hey, Sean, we throw out the.
What? What'd you say?
Oh, sorry. Cut you off. Sorry.
I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, well, you throw out the link for Travis, Plain Truth.
Oh, yeah. No worries.
No, I was just curious because I'm trying to do some quick math, because I have the numbers for our model for what I'm doing, but I don't have the numbers for any flat Earth model.
Well, that's again a big how. If we're talking about the difference between perspective and observations, do you really expect someone to come up with some long drawn out equation that explains everything else?
No, I just needed to know the size of their sun.
Well, it'd be better. Let's see. How about this? So is there any flat earther, and this isn't to you guys on the chat, you can agree to it or if you want to, is there anyone who's willing to be joined with a glober? You guys can decide a test, but you guys have to do the research together. I mean, I'm talking if step 1 through 5 means you got to do this, this, and this. You both have to do that research, apply it to your experiments. I would like to see that happen for both. So every bit of information a flat earther is using for his evidence, vice versa, will be presented by them, because that's the issue I see.
Sean, I just love your picture right there with these street lights. I mean, how much more of an explanation of perspective can you get versus that? And yes, you and I also agree. Okay, maybe the road's not straight, right? Maybe the road's
definition.
curved.
Hey, what's the definition of perspective?
Vanishing point. All things that you see go to a vanishing point. From the left to your right, from up to down, they all go to a vanishing point. You have no focus. You have no focus to your left.
Okay, hang on. I want to do an experiment now.
Straight.
Chris,
you know what I mean?
Would you agree with his definition of perspective?
I mean, for the most part, yeah.
Okay, there's the issue. Chris, you should have instantly said no, because, I mean, realistically, he just explained a perspective. Can't do that. Doesn't work. Perspective is what you see in your mind, how your mind perceives it. Doesn't work that way.
It's an observational effect.
No. Would you like to see the definition of perspective? I have it right here. And nowhere in here does it say that.
Sean,
does it say what?
And this is Webster,
Sean, throw the link in for Travis.
Oh shit! Thank you.
Throw the link in for Travis.
And the worst part is everyone watched me
no
get
link.
the link.
Come on, man.
And everyone saw me get the link off the Hangout too, because they can see it. I feel
but you
bad. My
didn't
bad,
put it
Travis. I
in.
didn't mean to. Yeah, my bad. Why doesn't he have a mod?
No worries, no problem.
Okay, so you want me to talk or what?
What? Pagan? Oh, hey, what's up, Tom? My bad. I forgot you were here. But I mean, if you got something to say that would add to it, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm here to say the Earth is flat.
Oh. Okay. What about? Oh, shock, guys. What about? Would you agree with what Aaron just said about perspective?
Yeah, I'll give you another example. Yeah.
What's up, Travis? How you doing, sir? What's up, Carlos?
Right. Let me talk about the sun for a minute. Okay.
Say one more time, Tom.
Let me talk about the sun for a minute.
Absolutely, because that's exactly what I wanted to go to next. Go ahead.
Hello. Let's talk about what I said.
Wait. Hang on. Be nice. Tom is being chill on the panel right now, and I like it to stay that way. So we're all going to be respectful. Because guess what, Glovers? I will boot each and every one of your asses. Artis. A little bitch.
Sean, you are fucking cheap. You are fucking...
All right.
Okay.
My bad, Tom. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. When I say the sun is close and in our atmosphere, you guys laugh at it, right?
Okay. I'm not laughing. I would ask what would be your evidence for feeling that it's that close?
No, you ballers laugh when
No,
I say...
I don't laugh at you. I didn't laugh. I would ask.
Sean, let him speak. See, Liz, I'm gonna mute the hangout.
Right.
I don't even know who that is because I'm sharing it, but it sounded like an Aaron.
Was Aaron?
It wasn't me. It wasn't me. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, let me just briefly explain about the sun. Yeah, what it is. The sun is close. It's not 93 million miles away, right? And
I'm sorry, I hate to do this again. Free-minded, do it again. I don't know why it didn't let you in, but come back in again. Go ahead.
Okay, the sun is not 93 million miles away.
Okay. Wait, hang on, guys. Is there more to it, or is that it?
Yeah, I've got more. Sean, when you go outside, yeah, when you're standing out on the street, yeah, right, and you look at the sky, you only see a very small fraction of the sky.
I can tell you how much.
Sky, yeah?
I can tell you how much.
No, it doesn't matter how much. You understand, right?
It's very minuscule.
Very small portion of the sky. Do you accept that?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And a few miles further down, another person stands on the street and looks up the sky, and he sees the same sun. You know why? You know why that is? Because there is something called the horizon. Where you are in California, you're in California, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so where you are, when you look up at the sky, you only see a small portion of the sky, and it's blocked. The horizon is where the Earth and the sky meet. Do you understand that concept?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So, I'm not exactly sure how many miles that covers. The horizon covers. Some people say it's 3 miles. Some people say it's 3 miles, but
well, it would depend on your observation, or where you're observing from.
Okay, well, it doesn't matter. The mileage doesn't matter, but just understand what I'm saying. So further down, let's say someone in New Mexico, right? he looks up at the sky and he sees the same sun. You know why? Because the sun is so bright, yeah, and it's a different area. It's a different perspective. His view is different to yours because you can only see so far, and he can only see so far. You understand? It moves along. The perception moves along the earth like however miles it covers.
Okay.
You know?
You said
Do you understand what I'm
California,
saying?
and you said California. Where else?
Now, do you understand what I'm saying? You're in California.
Mhm.
You see a portion of the sky and the
Mhm.
sun, right? And it's blocked. You can only see a small portion because it's blocked by the horizon. The horizon is a physical barrier.
No, but hang on. But for it to be a barrier, it would have to project itself higher than a flat Earth. So you would be saying the horizon's a mountain almost.
No.
And depending on so, for instance, if Crash, who is I think probably about 2,500 miles from me, if he
a little more than that, but yeah.
Okay, around your solar noon, so to speak, if you go outside and look at the sun, and I go look out the sun, the only difference is where it's at in our skies. That will be different. The size will be the same.
Yep.
Within relations to the conditions. I mean, there are situations where he could be cloudy. So
yeah,
but
that's
it is the
another
same.
subject. The size is the same because you can only see a small portion.
That makes no sense.
Doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
When the sun moves across the sky, you only see like a few miles, right? That's not enough.
That doesn't make any sense at all.
Wait. So when you say you only see a few miles, can you explain that part?
Right. Let me start from the beginning. When you go out on the street or wherever, on the field or wherever, you're looking at the sky. Yeah, you can only see a very small portion of it. Okay, because like 360 degrees, it's covered. It's blocked by the horizon. The horizon is actually a physical barrier. It's actually you
so
cannot
are
see.
Are you making the observation day or night? I'm getting confused. Is what it is.
Anytime, dude, look into what the horizon is. The horizon is
okay. I see. Okay, so you're saying if you have the sun above your head and you're standing where you're standing, someone who is further than your horizon then wouldn't be able to see the sun.
Dude, the horizon is a physical barrier where the earth and the sky meet. Do you understand that?
Sean G, he's talking about perspective, the exact topic of your show.
Well, the problem is that perspective. Listen, perspective does not explain anything, so therefore, no, he's not.
Perspective is real.
I would beg you to ask.
Tom, if my horizon,
listen to me.
If it's a physical point that's only a couple miles away from me, I can track aircraft here over 150 miles away by line of sight. From where I'm
at. Absolutely, on a flat Earth. Yes, on a flat Earth, absolutely, you could do that. Hey, good call.
Aaron. Here's the thing.
Rumpusing. Sorry.
Here's the thing. Okay, for one, the horizon is not a physical barrier. If it was a physical barrier, flat Earth would debunk itself. Because again, that you're saying that the horizon is obstruction, and guess
the horizon
what
is the reason
it's
you
an
can't
apparent
see
obstruction.
forever.
Yes.
The horizon.
Wait,
listen, Sean.
It's the reason what?
Tom, hold on. Go ahead, son. The horizon is not a physical barrier. It's what?
It's your apparent horizon. It's depending on your distance or your elevation.
Wait a minute. It becomes physical when the earth and the sky meet, right? And you can't see any further. It becomes the perception. It becomes physical when you can't see any further.
So that
So are
would
you?
be my horizons and Sean's horizon because I live on top of a giant flat hook.
I'm confused. So imagine a triangle, multi-tom-tom. Are you saying that the sky and the earth are like a triangle meeting at a point?
Do you even know what a horizon is, Sean?
Yes, I know what a horizon is, but I'm asking you a question because you said that's where the sun and the sky and the earth meet. If that's the case, then if you think of a triangle, at the bottom of that triangle where the lines meet, are you saying that our horizon is that?
It
Well, I
kind of
mean,
looks like that.
if you're talking about the triangle, yeah, it's the point where you got the baseline right at the bottom, right?
Yeah, the earth, that base is the earth.
And the point where they converge, where it meets at the top of the triangle, that's where the horizon is.
Okay, so if you're
And you can't.
observing and if I go to your horizon, do I run into your horizon, or does your
Yeah,
horizon then obstruct me
in that triangle, you can't see any further from that point. That's the horizon.
Okay, so I see what you're saying. You're actually explaining correctly. It's odd, but yeah, you are explaining it correctly. The problem is you're not explaining it right, and you're explaining it as if it's a flat.
What is his point?
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. You saying that the horizon is physical makes your point wrong, and that's why everyone's all confused. But realistically,
Sean,
you are explaining perspective correctly.
When you can't see any further, it becomes physical.
I want the 10 minutes of my life back.
Yeah, I'm not.
Listen,
You're
the
not
ocean,
really sure
right?
the point you're trying to make, Tom, except for the fact that saying it's physical, and I don't even think there's a flat earther here willing to say it's physical.
I need to step in on the side of multi here, because if you really want to look at it in an odd way, the horizon actually is kind of physical.
How?
Well, the horizon is the edge of the visual edge of the globe that you can see.
But seeing isn't physical.
But no. But I'm just saying that point, that one particular point
That you can't
or
see over.
linear point.
You can't see over that point.
Yeah, that's the edge of the physical portion. So technically, I mean, if you really want to stretch it, yeah, it could be considered physical.
So from beyond that point,
it can't. It's not.
Beyond that point, does it curve down, right? So beyond that point that you can't see, whoever's talking.
Hang on. Here's something that can happen. Aaron
but does
and
it curve
multi-tom
down?
explaining at the same time. It doesn't work.
No, fuck Tom. He's getting off course. He's getting off course.
Don't be nice.
So
He's a flat earther
the gentleman that was just speaking, I can't remember his name. I've heard his voice before. So he said, yeah, it gets to that point where it's the edge of the, apparently a curve. So so that's the point that you can't see further down of the other part of that sphere. Let's say, right? Am I correct when I say that?
Well,
what you're doing is you're.
Sean, let him answer. So me and you can still remain friends.
No, because what I was trying to do is make a comment about this situation. Hang on, both of you guys. Stop. Because I was trying to make a point, and I did want to hear what Unpaid Shields had to say, so I stopped so he could say something. But now it's my turn. Here's the problem.
Yep.
It's not physical. I like how Unpaid tank the shit out of it, but it's a visual. It's an apparent. It's something we see only. You
Correct.
See horizon.
Literally just came on your show
sight,
and said.
Hang on. Sight is not a physical. It's not physical.
He literally just came on your show and said that it is a point which you cannot see over. Cannot see over that
He's saying
point.
correct facts.
It's a location. It's a location on a physical body.
Friends just said that.
No, you can't point. You can't look at a map and tell me where the horizon is.
And that's exactly correct. But what I'm saying is, if you really want to kind of stretch it a bit, there is no point on the map where you can say, "Hang on,
go back
hang
to
on,
what you just
hang
said.
on,
Don't
Aaron,
stretch it,
Aaron,
Stop, Aaron.
Aaron,
Stop.
Aaron." what I'm trying to say is there is no point on a map where you can point and say that's the horizon. The horizon is just a physical manifestation of, or I should say, it's a I misspoke. It's a visual manifestation of the interaction of a physical object with the sky.
Yeah, you need an object, a physical object, to determine
So
the horizon is
over
where
that
it is.
horizon, over that horizon, is there more water? Is there more land or whatever?
Yes,
Over the
yes,
horizon, is
yes,
there a curve
yes.
going that way?
The horizon is
Okay,
not
okay,
the end
okay.
of the earth.
Great, dude, that's awesome. So tell me why
hang on
you
1
cannot see
second.
the curve on the Z.
A free-minded, I see you there, and we're gonna have our conversation, but we'll let
Sean,
them
this is not
meander.
for you.
Aaron does this a lot. I don't know why.
Yeah, I'm
Don't
listening.
mute me. Just tell me to shut up whenever you want. But chills.
Shut up. I said shut up. I mean, because hang on, Aaron, hang on. I've heard your point. I actually want to hear Travis's now because I've heard free-minded, and I'm gonna let him go. But I want to hear your view on this because I know you've been listening in the chat as well. So
yeah, the only thing that I would add to what was said is that I wouldn't call the horizon the edge. I would call it the limit.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
That's a very good way to put it. Thank you for correcting that.
Okay.
And I think the way Tom explained it, I feel like he purposely said it correctly while conflating it at the same time, because that idea of a imaginary triangle, and that's how convergence works. That is that is how it works, but it's not physical.
But Travis. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Travis, that's why I was asking Chills. Okay, so there's a limit, right? What's over that limit? Like what if
Well,
I
you
could
and I
see,
would
what if I
say
could see over
more
it,
limit,
right?
You
so
and I would
don't
say,
Travis, don't just call it a fucking limit like, oh, that's it, and give them the benefit of the doubt, right?
Wow, take a back seat there, big guy.
Yeah.
No, what I mean by limit is that you and I wouldn't see, or you and I wouldn't say that there was something over that limit. You and I would say that there is something beyond or past in extension. That is, it continues to go farther and farther away from us, even though we cannot see it, because the horizon is the limit of that which we can see.
Yep. Due to the actual channel's title, which is perspective. Exactly.
No. Well, perspective is what you see. Once you start explaining, it becomes an observation.
Sean, we just buried you. Come on.
No, not really. Anyway, okay, so here's the now. Or I'm sorry, Travis, are you done? Or
Yeah. I just thought that the this distinction of edge and limit was helpful.
yeah, it was, and I appreciate you explaining that.
I agree as well. Thank you.
Now, I'm going to bring everyone to a full understanding of what the hell this stream's even about. My boy, my friend, free-minded here. We had a type debate, which I'm pretty sure we both hate with a passion. But the idea is that in his way, free-minded, correct me if I'm wrong, our perception is why we think, or I'm sorry, the sun appears to touch the horizon. Am I wrong, or maybe you want to explain it so that it's
well, like you said, I like what you said earlier, and that's kind of a wild moment for me, man. When you said the horizon is not physical, because that's number one to understand. Yeah. So now that we have that understanding, we know that there's nothing physical about what we are seeing. It's all optics. Like the ground does not physically rise up, right?
What do you mean?
But when we look out towards the horizon, that is not the actual physical water, or whatever. Let's say we're looking over the ocean. Mm-hmm. It's not the physical water. It's not actually rising up to our eye level.
It does not. The horizon.
Towards
Doesn't
No,
eye.
it can't.
It doesn't
That's what
rise
I'm.
to our. Yeah, it doesn't rise to our eye level at all.
It rises towards your eye level. I
No.
mean, and that's another thing. When you talk about horizons, you have false horizons,
Well,
depending on
that's why we
atmospheric
refer to it as
conditions.
that's why we refer to it as your apparent horizon, because you're saying the apparent horizon factors in what conditions is there, where are you, those type of things.
Well,
Sean,
you got to bring it back, bro. You got to think about this, man. Like normally, okay, I'm about 6'2". If I go to the ocean, my limit is about 3 miles to where I can see something on that ocean floor. If it was just completely flat,
I'm
it would
confused.
be about 3 miles, bro.
Okay,
Huh?
start over. So if you're 6 feet tall, you're saying the horizon would be about
Roughly.
3.5 miles. Yes.
Roughly.
Roughly.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
But
But what
Okay,
is,
go ahead.
Agreed.
I don't know why.
But
you
some
brought
days I
the
cannot
floor.
see them. I cannot see for 3 miles.
Yeah.
That's in perfect conditions, right?
Wait, you're saying on perfect condition or a clear sunny day, sometimes you can at 6 feet?
Yeah, because we have to throw in atmospheric conditions, man. That's
well, I
what we
thought
live
I
in.
thought
Like sometimes, like I live here. I live about 15 miles from Mount Fuji.
Okay, but
Sometimes I can't see it at all.
Okay, but here's the
just
thing.
due to the atmosphere.
But here's the thing, that doesn't change the shape of the mountain. That doesn't change any aspect of that mountain. It only changes what you're able to see because there's these atmospheric optics or atmospheric conditions is a better word for it. But
right.
The difference is, here's the difference. No matter what condition it is, the mountain is still there.
Exactly.
The elevation of that mountain is still the same. Your distance to that mountain is still the same. And
exactly.
When we observe
Sean
a boat,
D,
stop. When we stop. When we observe a boat being obstructed due to curvature,
I'm gonna mute you.
We don't see boats obstructed due to curvature.
Hang on.
Hold on, let them talk.
The thing is that
let them talk.
We see this, we observe this, we record this on numerous occasions, and it's repeatable. Now, when you want to bring atmospheric conditions into it, now let's start from the smallest to the highest. Fog. You're not going to see it at nighttime. Okay, those are conditions that would make it so you couldn't see the horizon. But here's the one thing: if you use like infrared during the night, that boat still disappears appears to disappear at a certain point. If you had a day where refraction was up the ass, it was just bouncing everywhere. If you put in the atmospheric the index of refraction for with the conditions, or find out the index of refraction due to the atmospheric conditions. Damn, sorry, my bad. They would match. It would correlate. The reason we say a boat disappears or is obstructed due to curvature is because in each situation it is obstructed. If you want to talk atmospheric, the observation does change slightly, but that boat still does the same thing all the time. If we were saying atmospheric conditions were the reasoning for it, we would have thousands and thousands of different observations of the same observation we're talking about. But we don't.
I have that for you.
Yeah, we do.
I have that for you.
I would love to see it.
It's on my channel.
Plain Truth, let me say something real quick. Plain Truth. Let me say something real quick, bro. Now, what I was talking about, we've been talking about how far, what makes us, like, what affects us seeing as far as we can see. That's why I was bringing up the atmospheric thing. And now, what you just said before, now, listen to me now, because you kind of messed up, bro. When you said the horizon is not physical, that should tell you something right now. It's not going over anything, right?
Wait,
it's
again,
not physical.
Well, for one,
you see what I'm saying?
The boat that is being obstructed,
yeah,
it's not his horizon. It's not his horizon.
What is it then?
My horizon, my apparent horizon. If I change my elevation, it changes.
Hold on, Sean. But I'm going back to what you just said, man. When you said, okay, the boat eventually disappears, right?
It becomes obstructed due to curvature.
Or is that the horizon, or is that curvature? Now you just said the horizon is not physical.
You're word playing right now.
No, bro, is the horizon physical or not?
No,
because we're talking about the horizon, right?
Free. Let me try and take a stab at this. I might be able to clarify this if I can.
Go ahead, bro. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, you can't take a stab at nothing.
Aaron.
Okay. As I've been listening to this, I've been seeing some conflation here on both sides. Think of the horizon as a visual manifestation of the interaction of a physical object, i.e. the Earth, with...
Oh, go ahead, sorry. I was just giggling.
With the visual perspective that you got due to location, elevation, etc. So it's a combination of how far you can see due to the geometry of the Earth upon which we live.
Yeah, and when we're talking about resolution limits now, y'all are. It's like, Sean, you are confusing your resolution limit with the curvature of the Earth.
Nope. Because
that's what it is.
If that were the case, then
that's exactly what it is.
If that were the case, then I would be saying that planes disappear at 3.5 miles as well. I understand the difference.
No, I'm saying, hold on now. I'm saying, like, when I look out with my
is that the difference?
Okay, go ahead.
Is that the difference? A boat being obstructed versus a plane that I will no longer see in the distance. That's what
because you have to reverse. You have to reverse the way that you think about increasing your elevation when you're looking out over the plane. And I mean by that the landscape. So if you are on the ground and you can only see 3 miles, and then you go up a mountain and you can see farther, you have to reverse that concept with an airplane, because the airplane is higher than the horizon, so it's not going to perform the same function. So no.
But we're talking about optics now.
Yeah, but that's what he's talking about. That's what he's talking about, Sean.
Okay,
He's talking about basically the angle of which the light reaches your eye. Now, when you're on the ground, the solid ground blocks that angle, man. When you go higher, you got a better angle at what you're seeing, so you can resolve more of it, right?
So wait, you're telling me that increased elevation, the better you can see further things?
Of course.
That's not true at all.
What?
You can see more, but it doesn't mean you're going to be able to see something further away better because you gained elevation. It doesn't work that way. If I gain 1,000 feet, I'm not going to see something 65 miles away better. I'm going to be able to see something 65 miles away, but the resolution between that, it's not going to make it better.
I mean, Sean, you have never. Sean, you can, like, if you I hate to bring this shit up, man. It's always the long hallway thing. If you put a small object at the end of it and you lay it on the ground and you don't see it, and when you rise up you can see it, what has happened right there?
I actually have a perfect example of what I'm trying to say. So, and this is even my observation. So, and I'm not even laughing at you, Free. I'm just doing it anyway.
No, we good. And what I'm trying to explain, go ahead and get it. You got something to post or look at?
It'll give you a better idea of what I'm perceiving you're saying.
Okay, let me talk for a minute while you're getting it, bro.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because like when I said, like, let's go back. When I said about looking out to the ocean, because I recently went to the ocean, took the kids to the ocean about 3 days ago.
It wasn't your
I
first time.
had my binoculars.
Right? It wasn't the first time.
I had my binoculars.
Right? And I'm saying it wasn't your first time, right?
Oh, no.
Okay. I think it's weird when I hear stories about people's first time as adults to the beach.
Oh, no. I live by the beach, so yeah. And there's about two islands that I try to concentrate on. One is like 30 miles away. One is like 50. Sometimes I can see it. Sometimes I can't. Right? So why is that? Is
it your elevation or atmospheric conditions?
It's atmospheric conditions.
Okay, so then, but you just said altitude.
That's part of it. That's part of it, man. It's not a one thing, man. It's atmospheric conditions, your altitude.
But
it's not just one thing that goes into how far you can see.
But what you're saying is that you see different optics. What we're saying is we're explaining what we see, and even though there are optics, So the index of refraction, it's just explaining why you see something the way you're seeing it. It's an explanation.
That's another thing. Now refraction never reveals. You know that, right? Refraction actually hides.
It's not true.
That's true. And if you see,
look, I'll show you right now.
If you talk to well, I think you did some surveying, right?
Yeah.
Refraction will make things in the distance seem to sink, not rise.
Nope. It makes it rise.
I mean, no, it doesn't. I mean, can you show me that? Can you show me that?
Well, I can show you.
Actually,
the refraction you see outside, the light is refracting up.
Yeah, I can actually. If you'll give me a moment, I will try to find a video that can be presented that will show refraction causing something to rise.
Yeah, I just realized the confusion. First of all, the not see part you said free-minded, that's curvature.
Yeah.
That's
curvature.
The part I'm talking about is the light.
Okay. Well, hey, Sean, what if I can't see something and it doesn't even match your globe model?
Okay.
Did you guys ever consider that? Like it doesn't even match the curvature rate of the Earth.
Hey, I'm gonna feel bad for doing this, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Kind of like the Toronto skyline.
Yeah. Let's bring that up. I've been waiting on that.
Hang on. You guys got to give me 2 minutes because I got to answer this call.
Yeah.
Continue on though.
And that explains what I said about refraction hiding things. But go ahead and bring it up. Refraction doesn't reveal things, man. When we're looking out in nature, the light is refracting up. It's not refracting down. And I think that's the big confusion you guys have. It actually works against you guys, man.
Refraction also is not simply monolithic. That is, that it bends light up. Refraction encompasses magnification, distortion.
Plane, you're playing. Your mic is very weak. Could you?
Sorry.
Yeah, Travis, super weak, Trav.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
How is that? Is this any better? I'm in a warehouse right now.
That's much better. Thank you. Now, please, could you repeat what you said?
Sure, thanks. The only thing that I said was that refraction isn't simply light bending up. It includes magnification, it includes distortion, and it includes the diminishing of the object that you're looking at. It's all of those things, and it's not uniform.
Glare, good one.
That's fine, yeah. But when we just simply say refraction is light bending up, it's not that simple. It's not that black and white.
Yeah, I was just trying to put it kind of simple terms for him. But yeah, you're right.
Well, in its simplest explanation, refraction is the bending of light. It's just how does it bend and in what manner.
Oh, okay. Well, if you say bending of light, I don't mind that. But I thought the clarification was bending up. Because that's the idea. That's the idea that I understand the baller side to say is that refraction is bringing something up over the curve so that it's a bending up.
No, that's it's opposite, bro. Bending up will make the object appear to sink.
Well, hang on. I think I have just found a video that is a demonstration of refraction bringing something into vision.
Okay, let me see it.
Hang on. I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it right now. I think this is it, but I'm not sure yet. It's like a 1 minute video.
Okay.
And
is it going to be in the panels chat or just on
YouTube? Yes, this is the video. I'm going to share it in panel chat.
All right.
But it's, like I said, it's about a 1.5 minute video. So it's not terribly long. And if possible, I would like someone to present this because I'm unable to do so.
I'm mobile at the moment, or I would, Chills.
Yeah, I'm on my mobile too.
Here we go. Okay, I just posted that into panel chat.
Sorry, Shields. I'm rebuilding a 383 right now. Sorry about that. I can't help you.
And we're not talking about lasers in sugar water or
Nope. Just if you can watch the video, that would explain. I'm gonna get to posting this in YouTube chat.
Okay. Okay.
I'll be doing that right now.
Fellas, listen, fellas. This has nothing to do. A video
There we go.
has nothing to do. It's exactly what they want us to watch, which is an optical point of view on a fucking screen. To say, this is how light works.
Yeah,
Right?
this is not. I've seen this. This is not
Never.
Let me see it.
remotely.
Oh, okay.
Never will I
Let
ever
me see
take a
it.
fucking
This is
video.
this is like saying.
Oh yeah.
when I bring up centrifugal force, this is like saying,
Yes.
well, have you ever been on a train moving in a straight line and you
Yeah.
don't know that you're going fast enough?
Yeah, guys.
This is completely not even remotely
No.
what our world is like.
Yeah,
This
and another plain true.
butane, this is crazy.
Yeah, plain true. Now here's what's happening in this. You're actually seeing a reflection, not refraction. That's why he's at the angle he's at. This has been thoroughly debunked, man. Like 3 years ago. You're seeing a reflection of it. It's not refracting. That's why he has to be at that angle.
What
That's
is
why
it
he has to be right below it.
What is it reflecting off of?
It's reflecting off the butane.
Butane does not reflect light.
Are you sure about that?
It is denser.
It's a combination of the temperature and the
It is-
gas. It's
it
actually
is-
that's why he had to have the camera at an angle.
It is
Pointing
denser.
down, up
No,
towards
it was.
It's not refraction.
Unpaid chills, sit down. Just fucking sit
Okay,
down.
Aaron.
Because you gotta know. Hold on, bro. You gotta know light does three things. It gets
Give me a
absorbed,
chance.
reflects, and
Give
refracts.
me a
Sit
chance
down.
to answer these.
Unpaid chills, sit
Give
down.
me a chance to answer these. Okay, if you're going to ask me
All right, I'll
questions,
give you
let
a
me
chance to
answer.
answer
And then
Travis's and the
just-
other gentleman's concerns. I'll give you that opportunity. Other than that,
No.
sit down.
Aaron, show me some respect like I showed you some respect,
You deserve
okay?
zero respect. Don't ask me for respect. You gotta earn it. There you go. Go ahead and shit in your pants. Is that what you did? Fucking shit in your pants?
Aaron, you're just showing
Sit
that you're
down.
acting like a petulant little child.
Sit down. Travis, go ahead.
Anyway, you were saying, Free, that, what was that again? What was your question?
No, what you're seeing is actually it's reflecting and not refracting. That's why he has to have the camera at that angle below it. It's actually just a reflection of what's behind that. It's not refraction.
Not only that, but the one thing that I would like to see in this demonstration is his moving the object that he's bringing up farther and farther over the curve. Because the miraculous aspect of... Sorry, I'm in a warehouse. I don't know if you can hear that.
Okay, I'd like to address these one point at a time, and if
Well,
I've
I
got
just brought it up. I wasn't finished.
Okay, and I was going to address Free, but go ahead.
Oh, I thought there was an opening because he's... Okay, well, whatever.
Okay, very very briefly, I'll try and keep this as quick as I can. Free, butane is a denser gas than the atmosphere. Therefore, it will cause refraction. Just like when light travels from a less dense to a more dense medium, it does refract.
Hold on now. Okay, I see what you're saying, but everything absorbs, refracts, and reflects. You see what I'm saying? More or less. What you're seeing right now is a reflection. It's not refraction.
Free. If you were smart, you'd be like, yeah, kind of like the sunset these motherfuckers talk about, right? It refracts.
Well, I'm just trying. I'm gonna come at him like he came at. I'm trying to explain it to him in a way that
Make him
that he
sit
can
down by
understand.
making a good point. Just be like, yeah, exactly like the fucking sunset y'all talk about.
You see, Aaron,
we ain't gotta do all that. I'm explaining to him. This is how light works.
Aaron?
Light refracts, it reflects, and gets absorbed.
You see, Aaron, the
And
difference is
distorts.
Free is
And
actually being
distorts.
respectful to me, and I'm being respectful to him. You, on the other hand, are acting like a little jackass.
Go for it. What up, Chills? What do you want?
And that this is also why I'm being respectful to Plane.
But you have
Okay.
no point, though.
You were
This is
saying
something to look into, bro. That's all I'm saying. This is when I found out about this about 2 years ago. So I don't know the ins and outs, and I need to go back and tell you the exact thing of what's going on. But that is the meat and potatoes of what's going on with this video. It's actually reflecting the light. That's why he has to be at this angle below it. You got to ask yourself, why is he below it?
If it was
and not right
if it
in
was
front of
being if it was being reflected, then wouldn't those colored bands be reversed on what you're seeing?
You said the color band. It's just one solid color, ain't it? Hold on, let me see. Yeah, I mean, all you see is red. You know what I'm saying? You see the red rise up because it's getting reflected. Because of the temperature, all that has to come into play. The temperature, the gas.
Yes.
And that's why he's at that angle, because that's where you can catch the reflection at that angle he's at.
Because
I remember when he put this up. This is who did that dude? Clown, Woofy, one of them guys. I think Woofy.
The angle is required so that he can hide that red colored band.
Well, I would like to see him do it. Yeah, I understand what you. Okay, I understand what you're saying, but I would like to see him doing it straight on. How we're looking at things straight on, right? So I want to see him do it straight on. It's not going to work.
It does work because that's just the nature of refraction.
The one thing at least to start with is the butane, as you said, is denser than our atmosphere. So
correct.
We're not even remotely analogous. This is a false equivocation. It's not the same. First of all,
it is the same. It is the same. What we're dealing with is okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
That's okay. Second of all, I would like, because in various demonstrations of 2 miles, 5 miles, 7 miles, 10 miles, 20 and on, this magic of refraction brings everything at any distance to the horizon. So what this guy should then demonstrate is, on a larger scale, this light being moved farther and farther and farther away and remaining on the horizon. Because anytime we show stuff at 10 miles or 20 miles, you say, oh, that's being refracted back up from its location over the curve at a variety of distances.
Travis, speak up.
I'm gonna find a video that explains better what I'm saying. I'll post it in the chat. Let me see.
Please do.
All right.
This seems a lot like the conversation that Sean and I had with you, where you were trying to understand the difference between reflection, and you seem to not understand that light bends down most of the time.
But I think y'all got that confused. It bends up actually.
Bends
and that's what hides it. That's what hides. That makes things sink when it actually bends up.
I heard
it took me a while to figure that out. Talking to people.
Wait a minute, that's not the usual condition.
No, I just think we're getting what's happening actually confused. I had it confused too at first. I thought it was okay. It's bending down. Bending down would make it come over.
Standard refraction at 7. Standard refraction at 7.6. Does that hide or does that reveal?
Standard refraction.
Don't do the math.
That's like saying standard wetness.
Don't do it. Don't do the math.
That's like saying standard wetness, man.
There is no standard refraction, my friend.
Exactly.
That's right. Don't
it does
do the
not
math.
exist.
Well, that's upon you to prove, though, because that's accepted science.
You can watch anything. You can watch anything on my channel. Anything on my channel. I've got multiple observations in multiple atmospheric temperatures, humidity, all this kind of stuff. You can't apply a mathematical standard to a physical variable.
You got an awesome channel, bro. By the way, I've been watching.
Could apply, Travis.
You actually can
apply. Hello.
You actually can, or on an individual day, you can apply the conditions that
incidence, right, Travis? You could apply an angle of incidence, which is where a barrier, which might be the atmosphere, a vapor barrier, a humidity layer, a cold air layer, that's the angle of incidence where light may refract, detract, diffuse, distort. Am I on the right lines of your photos right there?
Yep.
What's up, Blue?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
I thought I heard a big old fucking silverback. There he is.
Boy, I know a bunch of people that are going to be really pissed when they find out they can't use standard conditions for anything.
No shit.
Anybody have any bananas? We gotta feed this guy.
Damn, you're trolling hard tonight. You're trolling almost as hard as Tom, man. Tom, you got to step your game up.
Doing good.
It's going to be fixed, and whatever topic you guys are on, I changed it.
Yeah.
See, I just want to know. I just want to know why when there's no audience and we're just sitting around chatting, Aaron's actually pretty freaking cool. But then when there's an audience, he turns into a little jackass.
Aaron's a fucking awesome person. Everyone to know that. Aaron is awesome.
Yeah.
But
yeah, he's great to just sit around and chat with.
Yeah, yeah. But when you talk flat Earth, he's a fucking asshole. And me and Aaron had this conversation. So he knows why I feel that way.
I just don't understand why he feels the need to show off like this.
Yeah, I think it's alcohol.
Because I have an opinion about
juice
you.
in him.
No, Aaron,
Not Sean
Aaron,
G.
that's not
I
an
don't
opinion.
have an opinion about
that's
Sean
not
G.
that's not an opinion. That I'm telling you right now. You have what's called, or I call in my neck of the woods, liquid courage.
Liquid courage?
Liquid courage is awesome shit.
How crazy.
Y'all would be right about that.
Okay, so I don't know. Like, honestly, I was on a conversation, a phone for work. So what I would say is, I'm sorry about whatever conversation you guys are having, but we're gonna go back to me and being free-minded conversation. I don't even know if you guys continued, got to a conclusion. I don't know, but I wasn't there for it. So, but at least
we just talked a little bit about refraction. I posted a link to a YouTube video demonstrating refraction, and then we were talking about that.
Perspective, motherfucker. Perspective.
No, it's really not. And it's, I think we've clarified that enough, at least to the point where you can have an adult conversation about why you think it's different, rather than perspective, motherfucker. Like, it doesn't. All you're doing is trying to trigger somebody, and I boot people for that shit. And I'm telling you right now, I'll boot both sides. I don't care.
I called
Especially
unpaid skills an asshole, and I'm sorry about that.
Because you're an asshole.
It was liquid courage.
That's called projecting.
I know, but it was fun. It's
Perspective is, right? And you guys don't understand. You don't know what perspective is.
No. Tom.
Is.
Because you say the word perspective in which you believe it to be, doesn't make it right.
You don't know what the horizon is, Sean.
There you go. See? You believe I don't. I don't think you know what the horizon. Matter of fact, no one here is on your side that the horizon is a physical barricade.
I've explained it about 20 times.
Okay, well then, okay.
And it doesn't make sense anywhere you tell it.
Crash, stop. Why don't you ask one of your fellow flat earthers what they believe, how your view of it sounds?
I've already explained to you what the horizon is about.
I'll pipe up and say that I was very confused.
First of all, Tom, it doesn't matter how many times you tell me a turkey's a mammal. I'm still not going to believe you.
The thing is it's not. You're on this whole thing of it's physical, it's a barrier, and it's not at all.
Okay, let me start again. Let me start from the beginning.
No. Don't start from the beginning. Don't start from the beginning. Just explain your evidence for a barrier. Again, that would mean that your flat Earth has obstruction. And if you don't see it going up, it must be going down, and all you're doing is then explaining curvature, but then you've made the horizon physical, and that's not how it works.
The horizon is the barrier, for fuck's sake. No.
Again, you explained part of it. You explained correctly right up until you said it's physical and it's a barrier. It's not.
Right, you've seen photos, right? Photos or videos of the sea. Yeah, when you look out into the sea, you see a line going across. Yeah, right? Do you understand?
No.
That line.
Actually, I don't know what you like. You're not wording it correctly. You're
Yeah, I'm really bad about that. But that line is the horizon where the sea and the sky meet. Yeah, that's the horizon, horizontal plane.
Okay.
The line that goes across left to right. Yeah, that's the horizon.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. and anything beyond that, you can't physically see beyond it because that is a physical barrier.
Again, right there. Okay, right there. You are explaining a sphere with obstruction, and then you say physical. You say it's a physical barrier. It's not.
Yeah,
unless you're saying it obstructs physical objects.
It works perfectly on a flat Earth. It doesn't have to be a sphere for that to happen.
Again, it is definitely your explanation, and I'm trying to clarify. I'm not fucking around. I'm not trolling. Nothing. It sounds like you're saying there's obstruction, therefore the horizon obstructs physical objects, therefore it is a physical barrier.
Listen, Sean, think of flat Earth.
Is that what anyone else is hearing? Because that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. I mean, I texted you in the chat that I could try to address this if you'd like.
Yeah. Go ahead.
From my
perspective. You wanted to.
So I've done some talks on my channel. One with Timmy Osman, Good Times for All, Mark Doxey. We've talked about this. I call it the ether band. The horizon is not a physical obstruction in and of itself. It's the atmosphere in the distance that obstructs objects that are behind it. That is, if you want to call it physical because we see it, that is a physical obstruction that is visual, but it's not the water.
But
it's not a curve.
It's an optical obstruction.
Okay, but
it's an optical obstruction.
Okay, here's a perfect example of where I'm not seeing there's no correlation. So, what you're saying is correct in a sense of I'm watching a plane and that plane disappears. Atmosphere is a atmosphere and angular resolution. I mean, we'll say atmosphere because realistically, I watch planes disappear into what looks like clouds and fog, but for the most part, we can't see further into across the world as we can see up in the sky because of atmosphere, the amount of atmosphere in between us. So I agree with that part. The problem is that it doesn't explain obstruction, though.
Yes, it does. Yes,
How?
It does. Okay, like I said, if it would help, and I know that we don't have all the time in the world, but I have at least 4 hours of discussion of this with my footage, where I walk through my footage, and at 6 miles across the Chesapeake Bay, I have ether band atmospheric obstruction that physically blocks a lighthouse and an Airbnb house on opposite shores. It is, and the only thing that changes is the atmosphere. So the atmosphere, and Timmy Osman had a problem with this, is the physical obstruction.
Okay, I would say that. Yeah, that can be physical obstruction because, yeah, I can agree with that. What you just said, Tom, not the same thing.
So Sean,
hang on, let me get this out because if I don't, I'll lose it. So what you're saying is, for instance, boats, objects in general, we lose sight of them based on distance and atmospheric conditions.
Yes.
But, okay.
And
hang on.
The resolution of your eye. The resolution limit.
Okay. Hang on. Stop, Baron. So now that we've covered that part, when we start talking about obstruction to an object, to a boat, so to speak, is that the same explanation?
Of course.
In a simple fashion, yes. Unless you mean something else, but straightforward, yes.
Okay, the boat curvature. So here's the problem. If that is the case, then when a plane flies off into the distance, it should disappear from the bottom up.
I already covered this.
No.
In your video or here?
Here. I told you here. You have to, unless it wasn't you that brought this up, you have to reverse what you say or even what we say. That is, if I'm on the ground and I'm looking out over the land and I can't see something, I go to a higher elevation to see farther. That is reverse optically when you look up into the sky because the plane is higher than the horizon that you're looking out toward. It's just like the sun.
Okay, I'm actually happy you said that because It reminded me what I was looking for right before I got a phone call. Okay, so again, and Free Minded said that. So here's the problem with that. You see more. Your resolution does not get better, and I can show you this.
Okay, no, that's not really the argument about the resolution. Well, yeah, it is.
That is.
When you say yes, it is.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's 100%.
But what the plain truth was saying is, I can explain it like if you look down the hallway, the ceiling will appear to go down, right?
Mm-hmm.
The floor will appear to go up.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much what the flat plane I think was trying to say in a simple way. That when you're up in the sky, it's opposite.
I'd like to ask Sean G, if you're looking out over the sea, which I kind of think you're representing here because you live in California, and so you get to see the sea. When you see that horizon right there, if do you believe if you were to raise up, you could see over that horizon and see more of the curve?
No,
is that what you represent?
The higher your elevation goes, the further your apparent horizon it becomes.
Okay, why is that?
That's a good one. Matter of fact, that's a good one, Aaron.
As you gain altitude, you're able to visually see what you couldn't because it's over curvature. The same.
No.
Wait. So
hey, Sean, let me ask you something. If you put something on the other side of a bowling ball, hold on, Aaron. Let me fuck, Aaron. Aaron, let me fuck. Let me fuck, man, for a minute. Let me get him.
Aaron,
let me get some in.
Stop. Hang on.
Sean represented it correctly. He represented it correctly. So don't misrepresent him. Okay.
No, I'm about to back you up, bro.
Anybody can mute him if they like.
No, he good. Just let me. Now, what he was saying. No, what he was saying is like, for instance, if you take something, take a bowling ball, you put it on the other side of the bowling ball. If you raise up, will you be able to see that still on the other side of the bowling ball?
So if you put,
it's going to depend on your viewing angle.
I'm confused.
Yeah,
but
let's say you're right up next to the bowling ball, and you raise up.
Oh yeah,
You're not going to be able to see something on the other side of the bowling ball.
Yeah. At the more elevation, the more ball you see. More bowling ball you see.
But you're not going to be able to see the other side of the bowling ball.
Why not?
You understand what I'm saying?
If you gain elevation, you could. Depends on where you are. You will see more. You 100% see more the higher elevation you get.
Now, am I looking 90? Am I going to be looking 90 degrees? Am I going to be looking? Say it's on the other side of the bowling ball for me, where we're 180 apart from each other. Am I looking straight up, and then I'm backing up away from the bowling ball and the thing? Can you define your experiment better?
Okay, yeah, you're right. I mean, let's say the bowling ball is about 10 feet away.
Somebody is hot micing like a motherfucker.
That's Froggy.
Yeah.
That's Travis.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. Go ahead. Hang on. Hold on. Hang on. I want to hear Free Minded because I have a question based on what Truth and Travis, I'm sorry, and Free Minded were saying. Go ahead.
Okay, let's say about 20 feet from the bowling ball, and you're on the floor looking at the bowling ball.
And the bowling ball.
If I have a sticker on the other side of the bowling ball, or other side of it, and you raise up, are you going to be able to see that sticker?
Depends on your elevation.
If you raise up, let's say 2 or 3 feet.
You can't say that. I have no idea your distance compared to that ball and the sticker. Like, how about putting?
Yeah, I'm saying you're about 20 feet away from it, man. This is to equivocate it to where we're at on the Earth.
It would make
it's exaggerating even with that, but
it'd be better.
You get what I'm trying to say?
It'd be more genuine to say put a Lego piece on that bowling ball.
Okay.
And then
on the other side of the bowling ball.
Okay, so if you're 20 feet, let's just say you're 5 feet away from it, and you're the size of the bowling ball because the scale is way off. But I get what you're saying. If I were to gain my quote unquote elevation at a certain point, at a certain elevation, I would see that Lego piece on the other side. But I would have to gain a shit ton of altitude. The same way.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
The same way.
That's key. That is
the same
key,
way.
though.
I would have to gain. I mean, I'm talking probably. I can only imagine how many miles I'd have to go above Earth to see what's on the other side based on my elevation. But there is an elevation where you start seeing that based on how the curve works. Now, here's my question. This goes to Travis or Free-Minded, because there's a hole that I'm seeing in your logic and how this works with optics. So let me show my picture real quick so you guys, because if I don't, I fucking keep forgetting it. I don't know why. So this is, why isn't it going up? All right, there it is. Okay, so this is an observation I made. My elevation is 2,000 feet. My horizon is at 65 miles, and that's using the horizon calculator. So here's the problem with what you were saying. I'd say the bottom left area, there are buildings there. We can see buildings, right?
Yep.
Okay, so what you guys are saying now is the higher in my elevation I go. Let's say I'm at 2,000 right here. Say I go to 10,000. You're saying that those buildings become clear?
No, what I'm saying is, go ahead, bro.
Yeah, okay.
No,
now,
I was just giving a one-word answer. You can go ahead and explain.
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Not in simpler terms, your field of view is widened. The angle of which you can see that object, the angle that the light is hitting,
it's not resolution.
Is getting wider.
It's not resolution.
So you can see more of it.
It's not resolution, though.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not. Resolution is how good you see something.
Freemind, hold on.
No, hang on.
Travis
hang on. Stop. No, hang on.
Let's get this.
Yeah, exactly. Because what you said is how it's described on a globe. Now, I made a little diagram, so hear me out. Travis, and this is to Travis and Free-Minded. If it's under the guise that it's atmospheric optics that gauge what we see distance-wise, and our horizon is based on that logic, then what would happen on a flat Earth is literally you wouldn't have to gain elevation to see more. You would just have to wait for better conditions.
It's not purely atmospheric conditions. That's just one part.
Well, it has to be, because if it's not curvature, what else would it be? Well, what else would it be?
Let me explain. Here's what resolution is, man. I'm gonna try to put this picture in your mind, man. Have you ever seen like a long road, a car with lights is coming down that road towards you, right?
Yep.
You've seen this before. It looks like maybe you might think it's a motorcycle because you see one light, right?
Yep.
You see one light.
Exactly.
As it gets towards you, the light starts to split into two headlights.
Yep.
And then you're like, oh, that's a car.
That's resolution.
That is what the resolution I'm talking about. That's what we're trying to say, man.
The problem is in that example, resolution is worse the further you go. Like I'm telling you, it's distance, not altitude.
That's the Rayleigh criteria.
Yes, it's both. Your field of view, the ground, the ground is physically blocking part of your field of view.
Okay, the picture we're looking at.
Right.
Those buildings at 10,000 feet, 8,000 feet higher than I am in this observation, I'll be able to resolute the detail in those buildings better.
Resolve.
That's resolution. I'm only explaining the fact that he keeps saying resolution. That's it.
No, that's part of it, bro. I'm saying that's part of it.
Because resolution is the detail you're able to see in an image or a video or an observation for that matter. For instance, the resolution on the hillside that's closest to us, I have good resolution. The cliff in the background, bad resolution.
Of course. We're talking about resolution and a diffraction limit.
No, listen, but resolution is distance, not altitude. I just showed you that. Just right there in what we were just looking at. I just showed you that resolution is distance because the close hill, we can make out detail very well. That cliff in the background, we can't. That's resolution. That's distance, not altitude.
I got a question for you. Sean, can you see your nose right now?
Yep. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, though.
When you look out, your nose is in front of your face, but you can't see it. Because the angle is set, right? Because of the angle.
Yep.
All right. That should tell you what I'm trying to say, man.
That's not you just explained resolution and distance again, not elevation.
Now what I picture this, bro, the degrees of your field of view. Right? You understand that, right? If the light is at once it hits past 0.02 degrees, you're not going to be able to resolve it. Your brain is not going to pick it up, man. That's the whole thing right there. That's what you guys need to understand. And then you'll be able to use, like, your eyes are a tool. You guys have to understand how to use this tool, man. It's like if you have a wrench and you don't know how to use it.
Hang on, slow down, because now I'm honestly getting confused.
Hey, Sean, can I put up a Microsoft Paint of his bowling ball real fast?
Absolutely.
Freeman, let some other flat earthers speak.
No, he's
just a little bit, just a little bit.
No, hey,
you have very
go ahead, y'all free to jump in, man.
Stop.
Man.
Let's get one thing fucking straight. First of all, Aaron does not run my fucking meet. Second of all, this conversation that I'm having at this very moment is directly to Free-Minded and Travis. Not that you're 100% saying everything we're saying you agree or disagree with. I'm just, because we were having the conversation. Aaron, breathe it out, buddy.
I mean, Aaron might not understand what maybe he's learning. Maybe he need to learn something. He might not understand what I'm saying.
I think he's got that.
Maybe he need to look into it more.
I think he has that liquid education.
That's cool though. I mean, if you don't understand what I'm saying, research this shit, because I have for 4 years.
I'm not saying bad thing. All I'm saying is just give way. That's all.
He's a flat Earth apologist.
Freeman, is this what you wanted in a bowling ball experiment, or did you want me to do it differently?
I don't get.
I mean, that's kind of a little bit too extreme to what I was saying, but that's not really 20 feet away.
Well, that's
also. Oh, I thought we settled on 5 feet. It doesn't matter how far away it is.
It doesn't matter how far it does. It does. When we're trying to relate it to real world experiences, it's kind of that's a little bit too extreme.
But using a bowling ball and a sticker, a bowling ball and a sticker isn't too good on reality. That's why I said Lego piece, because a Lego piece would depict mountains and things we would see beyond curvature.
Okay, man, I'm trying, because I understand this. I'm trying to find a way to get you guys to understand this, man. So I'm trying to simplify it the best way I can, man. I got it like this, man. I don't see how y'all don't get it.
No, but here's the thing, and I get what you're saying, because I
also,
have trouble doing that as well
enough,
sometimes.
I actually won't be able to get the piece.
Yeah, here's the thing.
I'd have to actually do the math on it. It depends on how tall the puzzle piece. It depends on how tall the Lego piece is. But I believe actually, if I moved back far enough, I could get to a point where I wouldn't be able to get it back in with height. The angle in which I could see the half of the hemisphere would eventually change to where I couldn't bring it back or I couldn't bring it back over, no matter how high I went. I'm just giving you a general idea from 5 feet. There's the point I could go up that I could hit.
You know what nearsighted and farsighted is, right? Free.
Yeah.
It's literally there's no other way to explain this. Literally, that's the resolution in your eyes being shitty. It's so 100% distance and has so when I say nothing to do with elevation, you do see more when you gain altitude. But right now we're talking, because you said resolution. Resolution is a big. It's a very blatant claim. When you say resolution, it's the detail in which our eyes or our TVs or our cameras are able to capture and or view. So when you say that, you can then move forward and back to gain resolution, but up and down altitude wise, it's not going to be it's not a focal direction. It's not going to help you at all. Someone who's nearsighted can't go up or down and their eyesight be better. They need to go closer or further. And it may be your understanding of resolution, but it's literally, you can't say elevation plays a factor in that, in resolution.
Of course it does. I'm gonna put it simple. I'm gonna put it.
I guess if you go above a layer of fog or above a layer of clouds, you could say that. But in this situation, we're talking horizon, curvature versus no curvature. It's not, resolution is not part of the argument. It's not. It shouldn't be part of the argument. It's not.
I mean, we have to agree to disagree on that one.
Okay, can you get something to have better resolution going up or down?
No, we talking about resolution.
Yeah.
You're talking about more of your field of view is being the angle at which the light is reaching your eyes is wider.
Again, but
It's
resolution.
more. So of course you can resolve it better.
Resolution. You're thinking in the thinking terms. Optic wise, resolution is the detailed scene. If you're thinking you're thinking. I think you're thinking logically, like in your brain. Then I can see what you're saying. But it has to be the mix of that. It has to, because there's no way you're ever going to get better resolution by moving up. If you can't see a TV and it's blurry to you because you need glasses or something, you don't stand up or sit down to see it. You get closer or further to see it. I mean, that's the best way I can explain optics.
But the situation that is in effect when we're looking over the horizon is atmosphere. So distance and height are going to have a different effect than what you're talking about with looking at a television with nearsighted or far. It's not the same phenomenon. So when I've been watching ships and boats on the Chesapeake Bay, and a boat is closer to me, and I can see the boat all the way till it reaches the water, and then it goes into the distance, and at a certain point, the refraction of the water and the atmosphere blocks the bottom of the ship. If I go higher, that will be eliminated, and I will be able to see the bottom of the ship touching the water.
That's not resolution.
Right.
Clarity.
That's still
if
not
I lower myself, I will lose that clarity.
That's not resolution. That's visual.
What do you call it then, Sean? What do you call it?
I would call it. All right, let me find it because it's on the tip of my tongue, but I would call it
Sean,
visible. Whatever's visible, I guess. I'm trying to find exactly what I'm talking about. Why?
Well, because I've been quiet for like 5 minutes. Come on.
I know, but and we're still on topic.
I know. So what I want to say is that horizon right there that we see, that is physical, I guess, right? In your point of view.
Wait,
if I were to raise up, if I
no
would,
one says it's physical, but one person, and that was Multi Tom Tom, and he's not here.
What do you say it is?
It's not physical. It's an apparent line. It's a
apparent
curvature.
Line. It's a apparent line.
It's the visible. It's where we can no longer see because of the curvature.
It's a curvature, right?
Of curvature.
It's a curvature. Sean. So it's a y-axis curvature.
Hey, Sean.
Yes, sir.
So what I'm saying is, if I were to stand on a 10-foot ladder, I should be able to see over that y-axis, right? That y curvature, right there. Right?
Yeah, continue.
I should be able to see a little bit more. So let's say I go up, 1,000 feet. I should be able to see over a curve, correct?
No, you're always at the top of that curve. You're not looking over anything. You don't.
I'm always at the top of a curve.
Yeah. Look, see where you are. Everything in your great circle is.
So I'm at the beach. And I get onto 1,000. I look out and I see a horizon. So I get onto 1,000-foot ladder, and I look out. Am I not looking out? And this is rhetorical. Am I not looking out over a more of a curve?
You're looking over the curve. If you're getting semantic about it, you're looking over the curve. You see more of what the curve hid.
That's right. Okay. Now, how come I don't see that on the Z?
On a what?
On the Z-axis. Why don't I see that? If I can see it by just going up 1,000 feet.
You just asked me why you can't see it backing up?
On the X. Why can't I see it on the Z-axis? Right?
Because, wait. Your question is worded like word salad of the asshole.
Okay, he's using the y-axis.
It was wordy, but yeah. Go ahead, Travis.
The y-axis is his depth perception.
Okay.
The z-axis is the horizon. So he's saying that if you're going to say at 3 miles you can see curvature at on the y-axis, you should be able to see the same curvature on x-axis.
No, because you're at zero. What you're saying is it would have to be how do you say it? It would have to, because you always start at zero, and if that's your horizon, you would then ultimately be saying you should be able to walk 3.5 miles, turn around, and everything behind that you walked away from would be above you. But it doesn't work that way, because remember, here it comes. I knew it was going to happen because of gravity. That it does not work that way.
Gravity.
Sean, I have This is Aaron. Yeah, no, it's nothing to do with. Hang on.
Don't worry, Aaron. We got who you are pretty well.
Aaron, stop. Because what you did is you derailed something, and I almost forgot, but I'm not going to. So hang on. So I pulled up the definition for resolution. The frame decision to do or not, blah blah blah. The quality of being determined or resolved. Or resolve, basically. So it's not bringing anything. It's not showing from obstruction has nothing to do with resolution. Nothing at all. The resolution is how like it says, the quality or the detail that you're able to see in whatever you're referring it to. It literally, I'm telling you right now, up down.
I got pre-minded some drawings.
Oh, go ahead.
Got a side by side.
Wait, hang on. What kind of mood are you in right now, Brian? You're in a good mood?
Me? Oh, I'm actually I'm in a good mood today. I don't really feel the need to yell at anybody tonight.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because I've heard you say like something like that before, and it just be like the kickstart for F flat Earth, and I know that's not you. No, I know you get extra tired.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
No, I'm in a good mood tonight. I'm not cranky. Okay. But yeah, just backing up a little bit, all it really changes to go back until you get to the point to where you can no longer resolve the piece. If you go up sufficiently high enough from a certain angle, you might be able to bring it back in over the top of the ball.
Yep. And that was that same thing as me saying, free-minded, that if I, here on Earth, to do that, to be able to see the other side of the ball, I'd have to go, I mean, I don't even know, but I'd have to go extremely high. Not even the same as seeing more boat. I mean, the scale of that is insane.
Now here's the thing.
Yeah, I was trying to. The same thing that Aaron just said was what I was just saying. I was just trying to simplify it a little bit.
No one really listened to Aaron because Aaron has rambled this whole time now, and I'm betting. Correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron. You're at least 5 beers deep right now.
At least.
Because I can tell.
But I mean, that's cool. That's why you pick out what's if he's telling some truth, it's truth.
Oh no,
drunk or not.
Aaron,
you know what I'm saying?
Aaron is
none of you here are my
Aaron's a
judge,
confused flat Earth apologetic. So and here's the other thing, he's admitted to purposely arguing like this.
I made $1,000 today, so fuck it.
Yeah, I can see he may have said a few things that works in what you're trying to explain, but overall, trust me, you want Aaron just to be on Aaron's side.
Yeah.
But
what I'm trying to figure out is, I'm trying to figure out which will happen faster. Will it get to the point to where the how far back I have to move removes the angle to which I can see to where I lose the top of the Lego as time progresses, or am I no longer going to be able to resolve the Lego because it's just too small because I'm too far away?
I may be able to show this.
That's kind of a good question right there.
Think you'll eventually
open a can of worms.
You can't even resolve the fucking bowling ball.
Oh, this is the infamous bowling ball Lego demonstration, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just so everyone knows, I wasn't like thinking I was like, put a fucking Lego on that. All me. I actually saw it. That's exactly how I knew to say it.
Yeah. The thing is, though, even if I can't resolve it with my own naked eye, Could I bring it back in with a telescope? It would still disappear the same way eventually.
And
You bet.
it would improve the what?
That
Resolution.
angle is wrong. That's wrong.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Show us.
I can change the resolution.
Wait. What the fuck is that sound? Who's trying to emulate
Somebody's got
Jose? Someone wants to be
No,
Jose.
that's crashes.
That was the crickets in the mud truck going by.
No, we still hear the cricket. Those aren't crickets. Those are frogs.
Yeah, it's a frog.
What the fuck is wrong with your crickets, yo?
I don't have any frogs around here. Those are crickets.
I'm telling you right now, Flat or Glober, you're wrong. Those are fucking frogs, yo.
Your crickets are high.
For real. Aaron, what do you hear?
I heard some like screeching throat frogs. That's what I heard.
See,
I heard
even he can pick
frogs.
that up. Everyone heard frogs, yo. So the real
Okay.
question
I also heard
is,
crickets, but I heard frogs
well,
first.
yeah. I like just now, right? Frogs.
The problem for me is that I didn't see the picture that you posted, Sean, because I'm driving. So
Yeah. No,
I'm
no
not
worries.
I'm not able to really engage in the picture that you gave, but so it's all thought experiment to a certain extent. If
No,
you
I
have
get it.
if you have
I've
10
always said
Legos,
that diagram is wrong.
Well, I would like to say, hang on, Tom. I would like to say this. I would be interested. I would actually like to have a one-on-one with you, not a debate, but a one-on-one where we can just bounce back and forth. Because I actually, you can ask free-minded. I like having a flat earther or anyone who thinks differently of any kind of conspiracy, as long as they're willing
Do
to
it
have
right
a
now, Sean. Do
conversation.
it right now.
I can't, Aaron, because you're here.
No, I'll
Everyone's
mute. I'll mute.
Everyone's muted except for yourself. That's what I mean. But because I do like the way you actually are trying to break it down and explain it to the very least. So, like I said, and I'm saying that because situations like now where you couldn't see the observation, and I would like your opinion on it and why, to better understand your explanation for it, it'd be better if you saw the picture, because then when I'm saying up, down, closer, mountain, cliff, it can make some kind of sense.
Sean,
Yeah,
you still don't
I actually want to
understand.
know why
do you?
Tom thinks it's wrong.
I'm telling you right now, it's 100% either one of two things. Hell no, I can't understand what you're trying to explain, or you're explaining it wrong. Because it's literally like two explanations, and it's basically all globe with a hint of I don't get it.
Yeah, that diagram, that triangle he showed, you know it's wrong, right?
Can you
How is
explain
it
why?
wrong? All it was is a depiction of altitude and what you'd be able to see over a ball. It has nothing to do.
No. It's what you see on a flat plane.
What?
Explain to me how a bowling ball
Yeah, dude,
is a
it's
flat
not.
plane.
It's not the
It-
ground
it's
that they're
the same
on.
as
It's
the-
not the ground that they're on. It's the ball that we're observing, not the ground that it's on.
Same as the angles to Polaris. It's the same concept.
No, but the problem is that we're not.
Not even.
Listen, as you're moving closer, to Polaris, it will rise up. It's simple geometry, and as you're
That's not
moving
crazy.
away, it will lower into the horizon. It's very
Tom,
simple.
this is quite literally the opposite of what you're
it
seeing.
only
Then.
No,
works-
that's
It only
Yeah,
works on the
well-
flat plane. It doesn't work on a globe.
Wow.
Okay, so you're saying that I'm wrong because this doesn't match your depiction of a flat plane, and because it works the opposite of your depiction, it means it can't be a globe.
That angle is wrong. From that angle, that's almost like what?
Tom.
80
You do realize that in that picture, the guy and that ball are in space. They're not
Listen,
on.
what?
They're not. They're not. Yeah, they're not on Earth. They're not on Earth. They're not on a flat Earth. They're not on a globe. The man and the ball are in space, and we're trying to figure out how high you would have to go to see a Lego on the opposite side of that ball.
Yeah.
Put him in space. He doesn't have to be on a. He doesn't have to be on a globe or a plane. Put him in three-dimensional space. It still works.
Well, you haven't given us any figures, have you? You haven't. There's no distance to
Wait. Let me show you how simple this is. Travis, free-minded. You understand what this is depicting, right?
Yes.
Well, I can't. You talking about the bowling ball with the
Yeah.
the huge ass stick? Yeah.
How this is depicting, not that it's correct, just what it depicts.
Yeah, I understand. I wish I never brought that shit up, man. Y'all going crazy on that shit.
Well, the thing I'm trying to explain
it was supposed to be just a little simple.
That I don't think TomTom understands. I think TomTom feels that we're making an observation on Earth rather than what we would observe looking at Earth.
We're looking at a fucking bowling ball in the observation.
As far as we're concerned, this is in space.
You don't have to go that high to observe that.
But what Multi-Tom was saying is right on a different topic, I guess, with the polls.
No, stop that. Stop that shit.
I mean, yeah, y'all can. All right, talk about the bowling ball, man.
Stop defending a flat earther because you're a flat earther. Stop it.
No, what he said was right about Polaris, and because it does correlate with the picture I gave you with the lights, the street lights.
If we were on Earth, making the observation on Earth, and that guy is just making up the rest of the triangle, and no, it doesn't. It really doesn't.
It's kind of
Polaris
a bad.
Would have to be at its.
Hey, forget about the
Polaris would have to be. I see from the equator to the North Pole, you would find Polaris. Yeah, if you took an observation at each degree from the North Hemisphere of Polaris, using a flat Earth model, you would have 90. Well, actually, you'd have 89 different locations for Polaris.
Absolutely, and it's easy to do that.
I mean, did you just make up a flat Earth model? Where's the flat Earth model that you're talking about?
If you did,
if Polaris is one body, and you try to line up with it using a flat plane, the only two that will intersect will be 90 and 45. You will have 89 different locations for Polaris.
Why would that happen on a flat plane? So what you're saying is,
I can show that.
If I had something, I'm trying to relate this to something else, but I don't understand nothing what you're saying. Why would you have 89 different?
Hang on, I'm going to do it right now.
Well, it's okay. I have a question for Big Blue. I have a question.
Sean Hawkins, that whiny little pussy.
Listen,
Damn,
Brian.
that was aggressive.
I want to ask Brian a question. Brian, do you know how the longitudes were made up, were created?
It doesn't matter, Tom. We're not going to get into your whole spiel about history being wrong, and you discovered it. It's boring.
Yes, you're right, Tom. The longitude and latitude lines, they're not really there.
Well,
but how were they made up?
You don't know the history of it, so how can you say?
It doesn't matter.
I'm sorry. I heard physical horizon, and I'm kind of optimistic about what I would possibly hear now.
All I said was it becomes physical. You know, your perspective, right? When you're looking at the horizon, it becomes physical because you can't see beyond it,
It's not
beyond
how it
the
works.
horizon.
That's curvature in mixed words.
No, it's not. It's not.
100%.
It's not curvature.
That's fucking curvature
it works
without saying
perfectly on a
curvature.
flat plane.
No. It doesn't even make sense on a flat plane, first of all. They're saying atmospheric optics does that. You're saying you're saying curvature because the horizon is curvature. That's basically, it's not exactly, but that's basically what especially in this conversation we're having between me and you. You are describing a sphere. But instead of saying curvature, you're saying a physical object or a physical barrier. But it's not a physical
that barrier being Earth.
Being the curvature of Earth.
Big Blue, you're being called out. You're being called out.
Wait, damn it, Aaron, do you call out everyone and then not debate anybody? That's what it's starting to feel like.
I'm still waiting.
It's okay, I'll mute. Fine.
Hey, Sean, let me ask you guys this. Besides optics, which y'all can misconstrue and you can call the horizon curvature or whatever.
Come on.
Has there been any physical measurement of curvature?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where is it at?
That would be LIGO.
Any USGS surveyor handbook? Any
No,
university?
bro. I'm talking about. Let me see where they did it, like laser tests where it hits curvature or
wait.
some empirical evidence, man.
Yeah,
empirical
LIGO
evidence.
LIGO does that. But if you want to take time and understand what the the survey data books are saying, you'll just look in one of those. It explains it perfectly. But I mean, you got to understand what those numbers are, though. I mean, but I can show you what I was saying. Equations from universities that teach these things, because there is, like I said, 8-inch square per mile layman's and a layman's way of explaining the tangent line and what you would see because of. That's not the curve. That's not. That's not the equation or the measurement used to figure out curvature. In that equation.
Okay, I just want to see this measurement, man. That's what it all boils down to, man. Where's this?
It's not. Doesn't
empirical
work
evidence.
Oh, it's very empirical. I just told you where. I'll show you the equation.
Words on a paper is not empirical evidence.
Oh, absolutely it is. It's math.
Look up empirical, man. No.
Math does prove.
Math doesn't prove anything, man. Alone. Okay, we have to have something to go with it. Let's see.
Yeah. It's called observation and data.
I want to call out Big Blue. I want to call out Big Blue.
You're not calling out anyone because you're not going to systematically piss people off on my panel.
Whenever you're done.
Aaron, you can't call anybody else out until you have your discussion with Crashes about mechanics.
No. He can't have his conversation with Crash until he has his debate with fucking unpaid shill.
I'll agree with that.
Okay, well, let's
Bingo!
Let's go.
I've been waiting weeks, Aaron. I've been waiting weeks.
Let's do the trilogy. Let's do the trilogy.
That's the only way I said. The only reason I said that, Crash, because he has been waiting for a minute now. And matter of fact, he was supposed to tell unpaid shill when and where.
Sean, you're a good man. Let's do it.
Well, wait, you want to do it now?
Absolutely.
I'll make everyone mute. And Ahmad, and I will not let it go off course. Which means
you're the moderator.
Liquid courage, Aaron, should really God damn it. Those are frogs, dude. Those are not fucking crickets.
They're fucking crickets, bro. I'm gonna go find one here in a minute. They're in the tree line on the corner of my
everyone in the chat, if you hear this, please tell me if it's crickets or frogs we are hearing.
I have never heard a cricket sound like that in my life.
In my whole life, ever.
Sounds like frogs to me, man.
Yep.
There's some awfully big damn crickets.
Let's do this. Come on.
It could be lizards now. Lizards make that kind of noise.
Crash. Sean, which one was first? Crash, unpaid shills, or Blue?
Unpaid was.
Okay. Still paid. All right, Chills. Go ahead.
You're the one who called me out. What's going to be the topic?
Yep. Yes. What is the topic?
Let's go like this. Let's keep it on top of Sean's channel, which is perspective, or sight, optics. Let's go this route, and say, if you're looking out at the horizon, do you see?
No. Let's get a topic first.
Yeah. You kind of
went
real broad with it.
Yeah, I would say, so we're standing on the beach. You look out.
No. Okay, so what you want to discuss is perspective. Are you sure that's what you want to do? I just want to make sure you understand.
Okay, so the topic is perspective and how it relates to a flat or ball Earth.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, we can go there. Yeah.
Okay, let's do it, man. I told you. You name the time, I'll be there. I'm here. Let's do it.
Have you ever stood on a beach?
Okay. Oh, here's
yes.
We're gonna go. Wait, do you want to debate or you just want to have a discussion? Because if
we're
you're going to debate,
let's try a discussion first, and if that starts getting derailed, then let's make it more formal.
I'm going to start a personal timer of 3 minutes so that no rants go on.
Yeah, well, cool. You guys know that I
inside
don't
that is between you two.
I only ask questions.
All right,
I don't debate. So.
Well, wait.
Well,
No,
if you're not gonna pick a side, then it's not gonna be a debate. It's not gonna be.
It's not gonna be a
See,
discussion
Okay,
either.
I have a side. I'm standing on the beach, right? So
No, hang on, because there's a problem. Aaron, you can't just ask him questions. What if he wants to ask you questions about your side?
I don't know.
Said to him, I said go, and he said you go first.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure. Go ahead.
Okay. Who's
so
this?
Yeah. You're standing on a beach.
Well, who am I speaking with? Unpaid what?
Unpaid chill. Which is, I don't know why you're just trying to make me say his name again, but go ahead.
No, not you. I want him to say it, actually.
Why? God damn it! Just start talking, Aaron.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
So, unpaid chills, I'm standing on the beach, and I can see a certain distance, right? And I can see, oh man, it's fucking awesome. Sun's going down. I can see to a certain point. What would that point be in your perspective?
Okay. Let me try and get this straight here. You're asking me what the horizon is?
No, I said I'm standing on the beach, and I don't know, maybe you've never been on a beach, but if you ever have, you stand there, and the clouds are going down, and the sun's going down, but you look out and you see the water, and it's right there, and when you see that, you can only see right to that point. What would that point be to you on page 2?
Well, on this planet, we call it a horizon.
What would it be to you?
The horizon.
Okay. So
are you wanting me to explain the mechanics of what I'm seeing, or do you want me to just say what it is?
No. I love the word horizon. That's very horizontal of you. That's very great. So if I stood on a 10,000-foot ladder, do you believe I would be looking over a curve if I could see further? Right?
Okay, if you're asking, would you see more of the Earth if you were to increase elevation? Then yes, you would.
But why would the horizon still rise to my eye level?
It doesn't. That's been demonstrated.
It has not been demonstrated. Okay,
au contraire, mon
you're
frère.
parroting bullshit. All right.
What's up, Montreal? Just so you know, Unpaid and Aaron are only ones talking for the moment, but we'll get back to a group soon. Sorry, guys.
You're parroting bullshit because I've been in a 10,000, foot elevation, a 35,000 foot elevation, and I've looked out both windows of the airplane, and I saw the horizon on both sides. As we're flying, you see that? I looked out to my left, and I saw the horizon. I looked out to my right, and I saw the horizon. Explain that, smart guy.
You have windows on both sides of you. That's how I explain that. If you're looking at a downward
I would
angle,
explain it. I would explain it by.
if you're in a
plane.
Aaron,
okay, are you gonna let me answer?
You have no baller explanation for this.
Aaron, I'm muting you so Unpaid can talk. You can unmute, but please allow him to talk. Thank you.
Okay, if you are in a relatively narrow-bodied cylinder, which is a plane, and you're looking out the window on one side, looking out a window on the other side, you can be looking at a downward angle and see the horizon. There's nothing magical about it.
Okay, agreed. How about forward? How about I'm standing on the beach and I look forward? I look on is that the Y axis? Yes.
Okay. What are you getting at? I mean, let's just cut to the chase here.
Well, I want to know what's beyond that horizon. Is it a curve, or is it not a curve? If I'm seeing that horizon that you talk about, and if I stand up and I look beyond that and I look over, is that a curve that I'm looking at? And if it is, that's fine. I'm not saying yay nay. I'm just asking you. What is that? What I'm seeing is when I look over, when I get up, get a little bit of elevation on the X. Gee whiz, my XYZs are not good. On the height axis, am I looking over the curve? Is that what you would say? I'm looking over the curve?
You are looking at a tangent line to the edge of the sphere from your current position. Now, as you increase in altitude away from that sphere, you're going to get a tangent that will allow you to see more of that sphere.
Okay. So my eyes are only tangential.
No, your arguments are only tangential.
They only focus on the tangential lines, right? That's what my eyes do? Is that what you're saying?
The tangent to the edge of the sphere, what you're seeing is the tangent line.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the horizon.
In your geometrical point of view, yes, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
And that's reality. That's what we call
So
it.
when I get up, what am I looking over? Am I looking over a curve then with my tangential eyes?
You're not looking over anything. You're seeing more of.
The what? Seeing more of what?
The sphere.
Of the sphere. Very good. Man.
Yeah, okay. Now, is it time for me to ask some questions? Because
No.
you've had your turn.
Now is the time for my rumpus point. Now's the time for my rumpus point.
Last one, and then it'll be unpaid chills.
The z-axis. How come I don't see any curve on the z-axis, whether I sit down or I get up on a 1,000-foot ladder? I see no curve on the z-axis.
Okay, I presume by z-axis you mean altitude. Am I correct?
It doesn't matter. Why is there no curve on the z-axis?
Was I correct in my assumption or my interpretation of what you're saying?
Yeah, I baited you into it. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So
bad unpaid.
Yeah, I know. Okay. Restate the question again. Instead of using z-axis, let's use altitude. So go ahead and please clarify.
No. Why now do we have two ballers against one?
You don't.
Okay. Well then somebody was
Just Aaron, cut to the chase, man. You're dealing with me right now.
Okay. Let's go, Crash.
So restate your question.
So you say that if I'm on the sea level and I raise up, I can tangentially see more over a sphere, right? So if I raise up, I can tangentially see more of a sphere. How come I can't do that at sea level on the z-axis? Why is there no curve at all?
That question was so malformed it should have died at birth.
Poor insult. That's very poor.
Wasn't an insult, but it was true.
No, it was a malformed question, a very malformed question. That was not an insult. I'm stating a fact. It was a malformed question.
Did you want to ask Aaron some questions? He's had a long list of them.
Okay, so I made my point. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
Sean, you're right. Yeah.
All right. Do you have any empirical, purely indicative, exclusively indicative evidence of a flat Earth? Anything?
Absolutely.
That wasn't the thing he wants you to explain.
What is your exclusive, empirical, indicative evidence of a flat Earth?
Yeah, that was unpaid. Yeah, he is right. He answered your question. Perfect second question though.
What was the second one?
Jesus fucking Christ.
What is your exclusively indicative evidence of a flat Earth?
I would have to say horizons.
If you want to tap at any time unpaid, I would completely understand, and you get to win.
horizons are exclusively and empirically indicative of a flat Earth? Is that what you're saying?
Z-axis, absolutely. Yep. Because you can't explain it either, so I'm gonna bank on that.
I think I explained it pretty well.
No, you didn't. You deferred to asking questions.
No, I'm asking the questions now. This is my turn, pal. So what you're saying is you have no exclusive empirical and exclusively indicative evidence
Yes,
of a flat Earth.
I do. I'm gonna say horizon. Yes, horizon.
In what way is it exclusively indicative and empirically evidential of a flat Earth? In what way?
Refer to my first question when we first started talking. Dumbass.
Hey, come on, man. Hey.
Sorry, John. Sorry.
He has not got disrespect to you. I expect the same.
No disrespect, I know. Refer to my first question. Okay.
I asked a question. Could you answer it, please?
Yes. Your question, my answer is horizons. You asked, that's empirical, and you said, how is that empirical? And I said, refer to my first question to you.
So explain how this horizon, this one singular word, is empirically and exclusively indicative of a flat Earth.
It's not just
explain how it points to a flat Earth and in no way does it point towards a potential oblate spheroid Earth.
It's not just a word, okay? It's an.
They can't hear me, so it won't hurt anything. Dan the Waterman, I appreciate it, man. Didn't expect it from you. He says flat water is proof of level surface. You guys can respond to that in the chat. Aaron. Yeah, stop cutting him off. Aaron, I muted you, so you know.
And as you're sitting like right on the surface of a spheroid, your cone is very flat. You can see very little of the spheroid. But as you increase the height of that cone, at the apex of the cone is where your eye is, you can look down and see more and more and more of the sphere. Okay? You're not seeing over anything. So you still have nothing that is empirically and exclusively indicative of a flat Earth. Do you have any other evidence? Or excuse me, do you want to assert that you have any other evidence?
Restate your question to me. The very first question.
Again, do you have any empirical and exclusively indicative evidence of a flat Earth?
I said the horizon.
Okay, and that's been, I think, kind of shot down. So anything else, or is that all you've got?
Let's let Shanji talk about that. I don't know if you and I need to cover it even, anymore. I told you.
Hey, Aaron, can I help you out, man? Can I help you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hang on. I'm paid.
But it's up to Sean.
Are you agreeing that the one-on-one has kind of dissolved itself and bring some more people in, or free-minded? Would you like to discuss? Like, I get there's a lot of people. I think a lot of people want to talk, but I actually would enjoy the one-on-ones a little bit more. Kind of want to see how that goes here. I don't really do it too often, so that's why you don't have nobody has to do it. I'm just throwing that out there.
But Sean, here's the thing: is like I could restate my point. He'll restate his point.
Yeah, but your point is super worded.
Dude, don't stop it. Stop it. It's
Hey, we're talking
fucking
flat. Hey,
valid.
we're
It's
talking
totally
flat Earth,
valid.
Aaron. I can
So
say
are we
no.
getting?
Flat
Are we
earthers
getting?
look
Hold it.
bad
It's
Hold it.
not even
Are
a
we getting?
flat Earth point. It's a perspective point. I'm
No.
with your
Okay.
show here,
Okay. How about this, Aaron?
right?
How about this? I'll ask you a question that doesn't make any
Hang
sense to
on.
me.
Are
Yeah,
we
go ahead.
getting back? Are we getting back to between me and Aaron, or is this done and over and killed already?
You didn't win. I didn't win. How about that? Cheers.
That was like if Mike Tyson fought an infant.
Okay, let's let the people out there in YouTube land decide. If you think I won, then go ahead and type shills. If you think Aaron got it, type in Aaron.
Yeah, I already did that about 10 minutes
Crash-
ago, and you
Crash-
won 10 minutes
Crash-
ago.
Crash doesn't believe that when you look over a curve, that when you raise up, there's more curve. He doesn't believe that.
I'm not sure exactly what you think you're saying.
he doesn't know what he's saying.
All right,
That's
guys,
what the problem
listen, guys, listen. Imagine a fucking
is.
huge
Wait,
ball in
Aaron,
front of you.
go slam
And
about four
when
more
you're looking
beers and
over
pass
it,
out.
Hang on.
and when
I've
you
already
raise
got
up,
him 6.
I want to
Hang on.
know, what am I looking over?
Damn it, Aaron.
Hang on, guys. I've got Aaron 6 feet under. I want to start shoveling on the dirt at this point.
But hang on, Aaron. You can't, every time you rant, man, I'm going to mute you. And I'll tell you.
I know. You keep doing it. Okay. I'm quiet.
I just want to make sure you know why I'm doing it. Okay, go ahead, Unpaid.
Okay, so I've asked for empirical and exclusively indicative evidence. You come back with a single word, horizon. Okay, so now we've covered that. Okay, do you want to continue this with another question? So do you want to continue this with another question to me, or do you want to go ahead and concede at this point, which I think would probably be the wise thing to do?
I think we need to keep on with the horizon thing, because you have not conclusively and evidently and empirically made your case.
Okay, go ahead. It's your question.
Okay, so when you look out, if you're standing at sea level, let's say, and you look out, if you raise up 1,000 feet, are you looking over a ball, or what do you see a point, the horizon? I see the horizon. When I raise up 1,000 feet, I still see the horizon. I still see it. What you claim is that no, you can see further over a ball. Okay? I want your empirical evidence. I want your conclusive evidence. I gave you the answer.
The phrase was empirical and exclusively indicative.
Good for you. Okay, go for it.
Satellite images.
Ooh, burn. The GPS we were talking about earlier.
That guys, let's keep this between me and Aaron.
Okay.
Satellite images.
I didn't know. My bad. My apologies.
I've got pictures. What have you got? I've got video. What have you got?
You're not muted, Aaron.
Pictures of what? Your pictures and videos of what?
Earth. An oblate spheroid that we live upon called Earth.
Did you take those pictures?
Me personally, no.
Oh, okay. All right. So then, invalid.
So are you trying to deflect this and divert this by saying that unless I've personally experienced something, it doesn't exist?
No, I'm just asking you if you personally took those pictures. That's all.
Have you ever been to Nevada?
Yes, I have.
Nebraska?
Absolutely.
Rhode Island?
Never.
Okay, so you're saying Rhode Island doesn't exist?
I didn't say that.
Well, you've never been there personally. Therefore,
I've been to every state west of the Mississippi except Louisiana, by the way. So you could say Kentucky.
so your argument is because I personally did not take those pictures that they're not indicative of anything?
No,
Is that what you're saying?
No, you were saying that you had proof with these pictures. That's what you were saying.
Correct.
Okay. So I asked you, did you take these pictures?
And I said, no, I did not.
Okay. Do you know who did?
Let's see. That would be the I can't remember the name right offhand. The Japanese Space Agency. Don't put words in my mouth, okay? You ask me a question, let me answer it. I believe it's JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency with Himawari.
No, it's NASA. No, JNA.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I couldn't remember it right offhand.
JAXA deployed the satellite, but the satellite belongs to the Japanese Meteorological Agency.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the correction. European space agencies, you've got Russian space administration. I can't recall what it's called. You've got a number of agencies and organizations around the world that have put satellites up in the air. I mean, for Christ's sake, back in 1964, Zambia started a space agency to go to frickin' Mars.
They really? Holy shit.
So just because I personally didn't go there, and just because I personally didn't take that picture, doesn't mean that it's not necessarily correct.
And the images from that Himawari are used by meteorological agencies all over that.
Hang on, this is me and Aaron. I want this to sink into his head. What I just said. I've got pictures. I've got videos that are empirically and exclusively evidentiary of a globe or oblate spheroid Earth. What have you got? Crickets.
Frogs. Sorry.
I was about to say that.
Sorry. I was muted.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
I said you were. I'm sorry if I didn't.
Yeah, fair enough.
Sean. No worries. I have pictures of Santa Claus. In fact, I got him coming down my chimney. I actually have a fucking picture. Chills. Do you want to compare pictures? You show me your Mars. I'll show you my Santa ass.
I'm gonna tell you right now. I'm kind of worried about
no homo
showing something. You're gonna need to email me that, Aaron.
It was getting kind of sneaky right there, wasn't it? All right, we're not getting too deep.
Santa is more plausible than flat Earth.
Chills, you said you had pictures of verifiable, evidential. I'll even add the word credential.
The hell?
Right?
Why? Because you thought of it?
Because I know it's not true. I know he can't even credify this. He can't even fucking.
Your microphone is very weak right now.
Evidence towards this.
That's
he
just
can't
his argument.
do it. That's
I'm sorry. I had to say it.
So my argument of the horizon, which is obvious, it's visual, it's something you can see every day. We all see it every day. He's throwing stuff at me like I have pictures of.
Well, wait a minute.
Saturn.
Now, what horizon are you talking about? The theoretical horizon or the visual horizon? Because there's two different
horizon that you see.
Yeah. Hang on, guys. Yeah. Unpaid is actually trying to have this discussion. Unpaid is actually trying to get to his point of the discussion. Kind of let him do that because I see where he's going and I see what he's doing. He's letting him bury himself.
What I'm getting at is I have pictures and I have video of an oblate spheroid that we live on. Do you have any pictures of a dome or a flat surface or an edge?
Oh man, I never claimed that. What are you talking about?
Well, if we live on a flat Earth, then obviously you should be able to take a picture showing some sort of a flat surface.
Yeah, obviously, to you, that's what a guy should come up with. I never said that. Okay. What I said was, look at the horizon.
Look at the horizon. That's your entire argument for a flat Earth.
Yeah, and you can't.
Okay. All right, then let's. If someone could do me a favor, I need a presentation whipped up real quick. Sean, you might be able to do this for me.
What's up, sir?
A wide angle shot of an ocean, then compress that image horizontally, please.
Be right on. Give me 2 minutes.
Thank you. Now, here's what's going on. Here's what's going on, Aaron. Okay, a wide angle shot. Okay, meaning we get to see a lot of ocean. Oh, and preferably, Sean, if you could find one that's got something flat or horizontal in it as well, I'd appreciate that.
Just an object so you can see. Oh,
right.
Okay,
just so you can compare.
I'm gonna wreck you if
the
you keep with this.
No, what this is going to do,
verify,
Aaron. Yeah, Aaron, what this is going to do is this is going to show you something. When you compress an image horizontally, make it shorter from side to side, that's going to accentuate any vertical anomalies in this image. So if there is curvature, then you will see it much more pronounced when that image is shortened or compressed from side to side.
From sea level.
Yeah, from sea level.
You can see the curvature of the Earth. Oh my gosh. So, let me tell you this. If you put your hand out and you follow that curvature, you follow it all the way over to the right, and you follow it, that means the Earth is sloping down. When you look over there at 90 degrees, it's still sloping down.
That was a great representation of a drunk guy on the beach pointing his finger out into nothingness.
Listen.
Just hang on, let
I
him
looked
go.
straight out. Somebody just told me that with a compressed representation of the horizon, that it's sloping. It's sloping down. So I put my hand out there and I follow it with my fucking hand. And it's sloping down. So then I turn 90 degrees and oh my God, the horizon's right back up to where I was before. Oh my, how does that happen?
My mind.
No answer. No,
I've got nothing to say because I'm waiting for the visual evidence to slam you down so hard that you bounce.
Okay. I'm standing on a pier. I'm way out there on the fucking pier. So
That's
I can
not eye level, Aaron.
90 degrees to my left, 90 degrees to my right, and then straight out in front of me. Right?
That's not eye level.
So you're saying when I look out in front of me, I can see a curve. And if I can press it in a photo, I can see a curve. So when I follow this curve down to my right all the way, so I look over to my right and I'm on a pier where I can still see the ocean. When I'm looking out to my right,
thing you get
that ocean is below me. I don't believe so, Sean. Come on,
what's
dude.
the straight lines and the circle thing called again? So I gotta.
Oh, the standard video test pattern.
Thank you. Okay.
Yep.
So this curve follows only my eyes, but when I turn 90 degrees and I see an ocean straight in front of me and it comes up to my eye level, then it curves the other way, right? It curves back towards the picture we were taking, and then it curves the other way, right?
Hey, I'm not really sure if you're straw manning or you just don't understand.
You have to.
He's
honestly,
he's just arguing.
Just hang on, Max. I'm just making a statement. I'm not asking him to repeat what he just said. I don't know. Either he's straw manning or he just doesn't understand. I'm not sure which.
Okay, I'm standing on the shoreline, right? Well, let me say I'm standing on a pier, which is 8 foot above sea level, and I'm way out, like a mile out. Okay, so I can see ocean on the left and right of me and in front of me. So I take a picture, and you compress it, and you see a curve, right?
All right, I'm about to pull it up right now.
Is that right? Okay. Now I turn 90 degrees, and all I see is ocean because I'm out on a 1 mile pier, and I see the same curve, right? You compress it, I see the same curve. Oh my God! So when I turn like 45 degrees, where'd the ocean go? It just disappeared. It went down on both photos. It just totally disappeared.
You say they went down? I'm sorry.
It doesn't even make any sense, dude. If you turn 90 degrees and look to the
Travis,
ocean. You'd have to
Just
turn 180 degrees to see the
you
other
guys,
side, not 90. You'd be looking
I
straight
didn't
ahead
say
again.
180.
Get your
just
rotation
let
straight.
it,
I
guys.
said
Let's just let it
90.
roll. Let's let him roll.
Show, dude.
All right, I'm gonna.
I apologize to those who are watching this and experiencing this for the delay, but this is really going to prove a good point here. So let's watch this little demonstration here. Remember, water seeks its own level. Oh, do I see some curvature there in the water? Can you zoom it? Yeah, thank you. Let's push it a little bit further.
I see curvature.
Let's squeeze that a little bit more because I want it really pronounced. Thank you. God dang, it sure looks like curvature to me. Oh, and you see those little horizontal lines on the test pattern there, the little vertical lines on the test pattern, the ones that are straight? Yeah, I don't see any curvature in them. But you know what I do see?
Pronounced curvature in the circle.
That's where I'm going next. If you look at what was the circle, you'll notice that its curvature has been magnified by this horizontal compression. Now, if we scroll up a little bit and we look again at the water, is there anybody that cannot see the curvature there? Anybody? Bueller?
I see it. Whether you confirm.
I'll see it.
Okay, so there's your curvature, Aaron. Now, what have you got that shows it's flat?
Okay, so I'm looking at that. I'm looking at your picture. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. I'm looking at your picture. So let's say I slowly turn to the left. Right? I'm slowly turning to the left. I'm following that ocean.
So you've got no empirical evidence. You've only got observation.
Listen, it's going down. It must be curving down. It's curving away from me. It's curving down according to your picture. But yet, when I stand up and I look at the ocean from a 90-degree point of view, from your picture point of view, the ocean is at eye level. It's right there. It didn't go down.
Do you see what it does? Well, better yet, the picture on the left. Does the ocean look flat? Does that horizon look flat to you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
This may sound ridiculous. I understand what he's saying, and he's completely wrong into his thinking.
Well, first of all,
he seems to think if he
with a compressed image.
But what if
he seems to think if he turns?
What if you guys turn 90 degrees? What if you guys turned 90 degrees and took that same photo? What would happen?
If we turn 90 degrees, you would say, "Why didn't you turn 180 degrees?"
No. I'm only asking if you turn 90. I don't care about 180.
And if we had done that, you would have asked it. What if we had done that?
Hang on. Let's take a pause here. Okay, are we done with this topic now, Aaron?
No, not at all.
Okay, so you want to keep being flogged. Okay, let's go ahead.
Yeah.
So what's your argument with this? What in this picture, what is in this demonstration here is indicative of a flat Earth?
What do you see in that picture? First,
I see curve.
Okay.
Anybody else looking at it? I don't know of anyone else in this audience that says they look at that and they see flatness. Everybody that's responded says they see curve.
Okay. So what happens if you turn 90 degrees and you take the same picture? Will you see the same curve?
If you compress the image like we did, yes.
The same curve. And okay, so with your 90 and your 180 or 270 observations, how would they meet? They would meet in a curved point, right? They'd both be curving down to each other, right?
Do you understand hang on. Do you understand geometry at all?
No, explain it.
Okay, it shows. Okay, again. Okay, we're gonna imagine a cone sitting on top of a sphere. Okay? The sides of that cone intersect at a tangent. Okay?
The sides of a cone intersect at a tangent?
Correct.
The sides
Do you follow? Do you follow what I'm saying? Do you follow what I'm getting at here?
No. A cone doesn't have sides per se.
Hell.
It's got a side, it's got a bottom, and it's got an apex.
You mean a triangle or a cone?
A cone, a three-dimensional thing. 3 dimensions, that means something has not just width and length, but also height.
A three-dimensional cone is a triangle.
No. A cone is a three-dimensional object. A triangle is a two-dimensional object.
You're right. It's a pyramid. You're right.
No, a pyramid is not a cone.
A cone is not.
We're getting into. You're trying to turn this into semantics. Do you understand what I'm getting at when I say that the apex of the cone is your eye, and the sides of that cone intersect the spheroid at a tangent? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Say again.
Just say no.
Yeah, because I'm trying to imagine a two-dimensional cone.
There is no such thing.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a three-dimensional cone?
That's the only type of cone there is.
A frickin' funnel, Aaron. You know what a funnel is?
Oh, okay, a funnel. All right, funnel's good.
Okay, the apex of this cone, the pointy bit, is your eye. Okay, this is where you're at. This is where your eyeball is located. If that cone is sitting very close to the surface of this oblate spheroid that we call Earth, it's going to be very flat. It's going to the cone is going to have a very obtuse angle. Correct?
I'd rather go back to your picture of the horizon there.
No, let's stick with this.
No, I'd rather go back because your cones and shit and your geometry it doesn't make sense, right? I'd rather go back. So go back to your strong argument, not this weak one that you're trying to present. Go back to your strong argument, saying that the horizon.
This is why I initially asked.
It curves left.
This is why I initially asked you if you understood geometry.
Does the horizon curve left to right?
It curves continuously.
Oh my God! So when I'm looking straight out at 90 degrees, and
now
then
you're gonna straw man.
And then I turn 90 degrees, and I look at it, and I compress that photo, it's still curving, right? So those two fucking points where you're 90 and I'm over here at 45, those 2 points that come together create what? We live on a double boob? Is that what we live on? We live on a fucking boob?
Now that would be nice.
Are you done? Are you done straw manning? Are you done straw manning?
You don't get it?
Are you done straw manning?
You don't get it? You don't get it? As if
Are you done straw manning?
When you look straight out and then the curve goes to the left, it goes to the right, when you follow that curve to the left and then you turn to the left and take the same picture of the horizon, it will do the same thing.
Okay.
So your left hand is down in a fucking valley.
Okay,
right?
so you guys have so I think we've done that one. So this is what's gonna happen. I got to take off, and this is very unexpected, but yeah, my girl's giving me the dirtiest look in the world, so I have to if I want to, enjoy myself. Anyway, I'm going to keep this hangout going. So I would like you guys to keep having that discussion or not this discussion. I'm just saying you guys to have your discussion because realistically, with who the hell am I? You guys can still have it. I was going to continue recording so that because I know a lot of people were trying to interject with Aaron or whoever else, so you guys can still have that opportunity. I would think that you don't need it to be live to matter, but
TikTok, Sean. Happy wife, happy life.
Exactly.
Yep.
Shut up, Max.
And I'd like to take a poll. I'd like to take a poll of those watching this. What do you think? So let's go ahead and we'll call it good. Catch you later, Sean. Enjoy life.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it, and we'll talk
See
to
you,
you soon. I really actually appreciate what you did there because I actually I really saw what you were doing with there. You were letting him dig his own hole and seeing if he knew how to back out of it, and no, not even close. Not even a little bit. So I'm going to end this unless anyone actually has like something that they want to promote. I'm not going to do a final word. I'm going to do a promote word. So if you have something to promote, let me know. Okay. Oh shit. Unpaid shell. I actually have that upload you asked me to do a while ago, basically showing what we just did. I just haven't uploaded it yet.
Okay.
So, I'm probably gonna upload it tonight or tomorrow, and because I came across it last night and I was like, oh crap. So I do apologize for that. Because
no worries.
It was something I didn't even think of that needed to be brought up. But yeah.
Okay. Go enjoy life. Goodbye.
Yeah. Again, I'm gonna record so you guys just so you guys know, whoever's staying, it will still be recorded.
Later.
All right, guys. Like I said, I gotta take off, but this was I actually really enjoyed. The one-on-one thing, I got that from Jose. I think it actually is pretty cool. I don't think Aaron was the person to do this with, but hey, it happens. But I think I'll try it a few more times. A couple streams. And 1 second, and then again tomorrow I'll be live, guys. I do apologize for the people that hang on. All right, that's better. For the people that preferred that I was in the mornings, but for the time being, it will be the evening time because I have a project I'm on now, and money is money. So again, guys, I do appreciate you guys being here. I appreciate everyone that did follow through the stream. I honestly didn't expect that many people to pop through because I'm later than I usually am. So I do appreciate the hell out of that. And again, this discussion needs to be had. Perception and the way we perceive things does not explain things. One of the other things is this resolution. Resolution can be fixed with distance shortening or prolonging it, or but not up and down. Remember that, guys. With that said, thank you guys. I appreciate you guys being here. Love you to death. I'm out.